Hey guys, tonight we're talking about the moment when the most powerful empire on earth bet everything on one city. July 1683, an army of 150,000 soldiers marches across Hungary toward Vienna. They bring 300 cannons, 30,000 camels, and enough gunpowder to level a mountain. The force stretches 15 miles when fully deployed. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha commands this moving nation of warriors, slaves, engineers, and camp followers. He rides beneath silk banners embroidered with verses from the Quran. 300 years of Ottoman victories march behind him. His soldiers have conquered Constantinople, smashed the Safavids, and pushed the empire's borders from Algeria to the Persian Gulf. Now Vienna stands in their path. The city holds 50,000 people and guards the gateway to Western Europe. Beyond it lie the German principalities, fractured and weak. Beyond them, France tears itself apart with religious wars. The continent splinters into 1,000 quarrelling pieces. Dear viewers, our big goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers on this channel, and with your support we can achieve it. Only on our channel will you find such interesting and unique stories about history's most dramatic moments. Subscribe so you don't miss them. We're sincerely grateful to everyone who helps us achieve this goal. Also, write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious to see people from all over the world brought together by a single story. And now, let's move on to today's story. You're a Viennese merchant, 43 years old. You've never travelled beyond the borders of the Holy Roman Empire. You've never questioned that the Habsburg Emperor rules by divine right. You know the Ottomans the way you know winter, inevitable, deadly, returning in cycles. That morning in July, church bells ring constantly. Not for prayer, for warning. The heat hits first, not summer warmth. A thick, suffocating blanket that makes breathing difficult even in shade. Dust clouds appear on the eastern horizon, visible from the cathedral tower. Refugees pour through the city gates carrying everything they own. They speak of burning villages, of columns of soldiers that take hours to pass, of Sipahi cavalry sweeping the countryside. The smell reaches Vienna before the army does, a mixture of horses, unwashed humanity, wood smoke from 10,000 campfires. Your hands shake as you nail boards across your shop windows. The weight of the hammer feels wrong. You've used it for 20 years to build furniture, not fortifications. Kara Mustafa believes this campaign will crown his career. Sultan Mehmed IV has given him absolute authority over the largest Ottoman army ever assembled for a European campaign. The Grand Vizier plans to present Vienna to his master as a gift. He dreams of being remembered alongside Mehmed the Conqueror, who took Constantinople in 1453. That victory had transformed the Ottoman Empire into a global power. Vienna could do the same again. But Kara Mustafa makes his first mistake during the march through Hungary. His army moves slowly, methodically, stopping to reduce every fortress along the way. Fortresses that could be bypassed. Fortresses that pose no real threat. He loses weeks securing his supply lines when speed matters most. By the time the Ottoman vanguard reaches Vienna on July 14th, the city has gained precious time to prepare. Emperor Leopold I fled Vienna on July 7th. He took his court, his treasury and his family to Passau, 80 miles west. The evacuation looked like panic. Nobles fought each other for space in carriages. Officials burned documents they couldn't carry. The imperial menagerie was abandoned. Lions and bears left in cages without food. Only the garrison commander remained by choice, Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a professional soldier who had fought the Ottomans in Hungary, now held responsibility for defending the indefensible. The defences consisted of medieval walls updated with Renaissance bastions, strong enough to withstand medieval armies, obsolete against modern siege artillery. Vienna's fortifications formed an irregular polygon roughly 2 miles in circumference. 11 major bastions projected from the walls, allowing defenders to create crossfire zones. Deep moats surrounded the outer defences, but the walls stood only 30 feet high in places, and parts of the construction remained unfinished. The garrison numbered 11,000 soldiers plus 5,000 armed civilians. They faced an army 15 times their size. Starhemberg imposed martial law immediately. Every able-bodied man between 16 and 60 received weapons and assignments. Women organised into groups to carry ammunition, tend wounded, and fight fires. Children were evacuated to monasteries inside the city centre. The Count ordered all buildings within 300 yards of the walls demolished to clear fields of fire. Homeowners watched soldiers burn houses they'd owned for generations. Property rights meant nothing with the Ottomans approaching. The Ottoman army completed its encirclement on July 17th. Kara Mustafa established his headquarters at a captured manor house with clear views of the city. His red command tent, large enough to hold 50 men, went up beside it. From this position he directed the deployment of his forces. Janissaries, the elite infantry corps, received positions directly opposite the most vulnerable sections of wall. Provincial troops spread around the perimeter to maintain the blockade. Cavalry units patrolled the surrounding countryside, cutting all roads into Vienna. No messenger could enter or leave the city without running a gauntlet of Ottoman horsemen. The Grand Vizier then made his second catastrophic decision. He chose siege over assault. An immediate attack might have overwhelmed the defenders through sheer numbers despite heavy casualties. Ottomans had taken fortresses this way before, massed infantry charges accepting terrible losses to carry walls before defenders could organise. But Kara Mustafa wanted Vienna intact. An assault would damage the city, reduce its value as plunder, and kill the population he intended to sell into slavery. He calculated that starvation would force surrender within weeks. The siege would preserve Vienna's wealth for distribution among his officers, and more importantly himself. Ottoman engineers began digging approach trenches on July 18th. Thousands of labourers, many of them conscripted Christians from conquered territories, dug zigzag trenches that crept toward Vienna's walls. The pattern was ancient. Zigzags prevented defenders from shooting straight down the trench lines. Each night the trenches advanced another 10 yards. Each morning, Viennese defenders woke to find Ottoman positions closer. The psychological pressure was deliberate and effective. Artillery batteries opened fire on July 20th. 300 cannons began systematic bombardment. The noise became constant, a rolling thunder that never stopped. Gunners targeted specific sections of wall, pounding the same spots repeatedly to create breaches. Stone blocks shattered under the impact. Mortar rounds arced over the walls, exploding inside the city. Buildings collapsed. Fires started. The civilian population crowded into basements and cellars, living in darkness while their city disintegrated above them. Starhemberg organised the defence with methodical efficiency. He divided the perimeter into sectors, each commanded by an experienced officer. Rotation schedules kept troops from collapsing with exhaustion. Repair crews worked constantly, patching damaged walls with earth, timber and sandbags. The garrison became a machine, every person knowing their role, executing it mechanically day after day. Food rationing began immediately. The city held supplies for perhaps 2 months at normal consumption. Starhemberg cut rations to subsistence levels, enough to keep people functioning, not enough to satisfy hunger. Bread became the primary food. Meat disappeared within days. The wealthy found their privilege meaningless when no amount of money could buy what didn't exist. The real Ottoman weapon wasn't visible from the walls. Mining operations started in secret during the fourth week of July. Engineers selected points along the fortifications where underground tunnels could reach the foundations. Crews worked in shifts, digging narrow passages through clay and rock. They shored up tunnels with timber supports, creating underground corridors extending dozens of yards beneath Vienna's defences. The plan was simple: dig under the walls, pack the tunnel terminus with gunpowder kegs, light the fuse, and blow the fortifications apart from below. Vienna's defenders suspected mining but couldn't pinpoint the locations. Starhemberg ordered counter-mining operations. His engineers dug their own tunnels, trying to intercept Ottoman passages before they reached the walls. This created an underground war invisible to the surface world. Men fought in pitch darkness with knives and clubs in spaces too narrow to swing a sword. Bodies were dragged back and dumped in cross tunnels. No one kept count of the dead in these subterranean battles. The first mine exploded on August 5th. A 50-yard section of the outer wall erupted in a fountain of stone, earth, and fire. The blast wave shattered windows across half the city. Rubble filled the moat, creating a natural ramp. Janissaries poured through the breach before the dust settled. They carried scaling ladders, pushing forward in tight formations. Defenders rushed to the gap, firing muskets point-blank into the advancing troops. The fight became savage. Viennese soldiers swung halberds and pikes. Janissaries replied with scimitars and axes. Men slipped on blood-soaked stone. Starhemberg personally led the counterattack. He organised a flying column of his best troops, held in reserve for exactly this situation. They hit the Janissaries from the flank, driving them back through the breach. But the gap remained open. Engineers and civilians rushed forward with carts full of earth, timber and stones. They built a makeshift rampart while soldiers held the perimeter. By nightfall, the breach was plugged. Not repaired, plugged. A temporary barrier that could be defended but wouldn't withstand another mine. Kara Mustafa watched the failed assault from his command post. He'd expected quick success. The Janissaries' failure surprised him. His officers advised a general assault while defender morale was shaken, but the Grand Vizier refused. More mining, he ordered. More systematic approach. He couldn't risk losing too many elite troops in frontal attacks. The siege would work. Vienna would fall. August brought no relief, only intensifying pressure. 3 more mines exploded over the following 2 weeks. Each created another breach, another desperate fight, another temporary repair. The fortifications became a patchwork of original stonework and improvised barriers. Starhemberg's garrison shrank daily. Combat casualties mounted. Disease spread through overcrowded conditions. Typhus appeared in the refugee quarters. Dysentery ran through the civilian population. The hospitals overflowed, then stopped accepting new patients. Wounded soldiers recovered in the streets or died there. Food stocks dwindled faster than predicted. Residents had hidden private supplies, consuming them before rationing could seize everything. By mid-August, the official stores were half depleted with no end to the siege in sight. Horses were slaughtered for meat. Cats and dogs disappeared from the streets. Rats became food rather than pests. Leather belts and boots were boiled into gelatinous soup that provided calories if nothing else. Starhemberg sent messengers through the Ottoman lines on August 10th. 3 riders, each carrying identical letters addressed to Emperor Leopold. The messages described Vienna's desperate situation and begged for immediate relief. One messenger was captured and impaled outside the walls, where defenders could see him die slowly. One disappeared completely, presumably killed quietly. The third reached Imperial headquarters in Linz. Leopold read the letter and promised help was coming. He didn't specify when. The Count sent more messengers every few days. Some got through, most didn't. Each successful message painted a darker picture. The garrison was down to 8,000 effective fighters. Ammunition ran low. Powder reserves stood at 30% of original stocks. The civilian population approached starvation. Without relief by September, surrender became inevitable. Inside the Ottoman camp, Kara Mustafa enjoyed luxuries that would shame many European princes. His personal tent contained silk carpets, gold-threaded cushions, and a functioning fountain. Servants prepared elaborate meals while Viennese residents ate rats. The Grand Vizier attended to paperwork, writing detailed reports to the Sultan describing imminent victory. He had already begun planning the victory celebration and dividing Vienna's wealth among his officers. The siege was succeeding perfectly by his calculation. Another few weeks, and the city would collapse from within. But news reached the Ottoman camp that should have alarmed him. Intelligence reports described troop movements across Germany and Poland. The Holy Roman Emperor was assembling a relief force. King Jan Sobieski of Poland had mobilized his army. Various German princes contributed contingents. Kara Mustafa dismissed these reports. Any relief army would arrive too late and be too small. His cavalry controlled all approaches to Vienna. His troops outnumbered any force the Europeans could assemble. The siege would end before relief arrived. This assumption was his third and final mistake. By late August, Vienna's defences teetered on collapse. Only 3 bastions remained fully intact. Ottoman trenches reached the moat in multiple locations. Janissaries occupied parts of the outer defensive works. Hand-to-hand combat occurred daily as Ottomans pushed forward and defenders pushed back. The garrison fought with the exhaustion of men who'd been at battle stations for 6 weeks straight. Starhemberg calculated they had perhaps 2 weeks before the defences failed completely. The Count gathered his officers on August 28th. He laid out the situation without sugarcoating anything. The fortifications couldn't hold much longer. Food would run out in 10 days. Ammunition might last a week with current consumption rates. No confirmed word had arrived about relief forces. They faced a choice: negotiate surrender now while they still had leverage, or fight to the end hoping rescue arrived. Starhemberg didn't ask for a vote. He told them they would fight. If relief didn't come, they'd sell their lives as dearly as possible. Vienna would not be surrendered while defenders could still pull a trigger. September arrived with Vienna burning. Ottoman artillery had shifted tactics, firing incendiary rounds designed to start fires rather than breach walls. The blazes spread through the densely packed medieval quarters. Bucket brigades formed, but water supplies ran low. Wells had been contaminated by seepage from mass graves. The Danube flowed outside the walls, controlled by Ottoman troops. Vienna burned while water ran past untouchable. Starhemberg's final message reached Emperor Leopold on September 4th. The letter was brief. If relief does not arrive within days, the city is lost. The messenger reported that the Count had stopped sleeping, spending nights inspecting positions and encouraging exhausted soldiers. The garrison was down to 4,000 men capable of fighting. They were melting church bells to cast cannonballs. They were loading cannons with chains, broken tools, anything metal. The end approached with mathematical certainty. The question wasn't whether Vienna would fall. The question was whether anyone would arrive in time to prevent it. September 6th, 1683. Vienna's walls crumble section by section under relentless bombardment. Ottoman gunners have perfected their aim after 7 weeks of constant firing. They strike the same spots repeatedly, pulverizing stone into dust. The Berg Bastion, once the strongest point in the defences, now resembles a pile of rubble held together by prayers and sandbags. Cracks spiderweb across the level bastion's face. The Melka Bastion leans inward at a visible angle, ready to collapse under its own weight. Underground, the real war intensifies. Ottoman miners work in 3 shifts around the clock, never stopping. They've dug 17 major tunnels under different sections of the fortifications. Each tunnel branches into smaller passages, creating a maze beneath Vienna's foundations. The Ottomans learned mining techniques from European prisoners, then perfected them. Their engineers calculate angles precisely, measuring depth and distance to emerge exactly where intended. Wooden supports line every tunnel, preventing cave-ins until the moment of detonation. Vienna's counterminers stumble through darkness with only candles for light. They listen for sounds of digging, pressing ears against tunnel walls to detect enemy work. When they locate an Ottoman passage, they have 2 options: break through and fight, or dig their own mine to destroy it. Both choices involve crawling through spaces barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. The air grows thin 20 feet underground. Men work until they pass out from lack of oxygen, then are dragged back by their feet. A counter-mining team breaks into an Ottoman tunnel on September 7th. The Turks were packing the terminus with powder kegs when Vienna's miners burst through the wall. Fighting erupts in absolute darkness. A candle gets knocked over, extinguishing instantly. Men swing picks blindly, hitting friend and foe randomly. Someone lights a torch. The tunnel illuminates, revealing a dozen gunpowder barrels stacked against timber supports directly beneath the Berg bastion. One spark would detonate everything, collapsing both tunnels and killing everyone inside. The fighting stops. Both sides back away slowly, leaving the chamber like a loaded gun pointed at Vienna's heart. Starhemberg orders the powder removed before Ottomans return in force. Volunteers descend into the captured tunnel, forming a chain to pass the barrels up carefully. Each keg weighs 40 pounds and could explode from rough handling. Sweat makes hands slippery. The wooden stairs creak under the weight. One barrel slips, tumbling down 3 steps before someone catches it. The man's hands shake so badly he can barely grip anything. They extract 8 barrels before Ottoman troops counterattack, forcing the Viennese to seal the tunnel entrance. The next mine explodes September 8th under the Berg Ravelin, an outer defensive work protecting the main walls. The explosion creates a crater 30 feet wide. Earth rains down across half the city. The Ravelin simply disappears, replaced by a smoking pit. Janissaries charge through before the echoes fade. They carry fascines, bundles of sticks used to fill ditches and scaling ladders. The assault hits with overwhelming force. Defenders fire muskets from prepared positions, dropping attackers in waves, but more keep coming. The Janissaries reach the crater's edge and begin crossing. Starhemberg's reserves sprint toward the breach. These aren't professional soldiers anymore. They're bakers, clerks, priests, and merchants who've been handed pikes and told to hold the line. They form a ragged formation at the crater's edge, presenting a wall of spear points. The Janissaries hit them like a hammer striking glass. The formation shatters. Men go down screaming. The Ottomans push forward, enlarging their foothold. For 20 minutes, it appears Vienna will fall today, right now, through this single breach. A unit of student volunteers counterattacks from the flank. Vienna's university closed when the siege began, turning students into soldiers. 90 young men, most under 25, charge the Janissaries with swords and spontoons. They have no armour and minimal training. They're slaughtered systematically, but their attack buys time. Regular troops arrive and restore the line. The Janissaries withdraw after losing 300 men. The students lose 63. Their bodies are left in the crater because no one has time to retrieve them. Food becomes the silent killer. Official rations drop to 8 ounces of bread per day. That's roughly 4 slices for an adult male doing heavy labour. Soldiers defending the walls burn thousands of calories daily and receive barely enough to sustain a sedentary clerk. Hunger weakens them more than wounds. Men lose 20–30 pounds in weeks. Their uniforms hang loose, belts cinch tighter and tighter until new holes must be punched. Horses continue dying for meat, but most were consumed weeks ago. The remaining animals are too valuable for transportation and hauling artillery to be slaughtered. Soldiers hunt rats in the cellars, competing with starving civilians for the same prey. A fat rat becomes a prize worth fighting over. People boil grass, tree bark, and shoe leather, extracting any possible nutrition. The city's cats and dogs vanished in August. Now pigeons disappear from the rooftops. Crows learn to avoid Vienna entirely. Scurvy appears among the garrison. Gums swell and bleed. Teeth loosen. Old wounds reopen spontaneously. The disease weakens men already operating at the edge of collapse. Starhemberg orders the few remaining vegetables distributed to soldiers first, civilians second. This creates resentment. Hungry residents watch soldiers receive extra rations while children starve. The Count ignores complaints. Dead soldiers mean a fallen city, which means everyone dies anyway. Water becomes contaminated. Wells inside the city drew from aquifers that also drain the mass grave areas. Seepage from thousands of buried corpses poisons the groundwater. People drink it anyway because they have no choice. Dysentery spreads explosively. The disease dehydrates its victims, who drink more contaminated water, worsening their condition. A vicious cycle kills hundreds. The hospitals stop accepting dysentery cases. There's nothing to be done except let them die in their homes. Typhus reaches epidemic levels by mid-September. The disease spreads through body lice, which thrive in the overcrowded, unwashed conditions. People haven't bathed in weeks. They wear the same clothes constantly because changing wastes precious time and energy. Lice jump from person to person in the packed cellars where civilians shelter. Once infected, victims develop high fever, severe headache, and a distinctive rash. Most die within 2 weeks. The survivors gain immunity but are often too weak to return to work. Medical care collapses under the strain. Vienna entered the siege with 400 trained doctors and surgeons. By September, fewer than 200 remain alive and functional. They work until dropping from exhaustion, catch a few hours of sleep, then return to patients. Supplies of bandages, laudanum, and surgical tools run out. Doctors amputate limbs without anaesthetic. They use wine to sterilize wounds. They reuse bandages until the fabric disintegrates. The wounded lie in rows on church floors, waiting for treatment that may never come. Another mine detonates September 10th beneath the Louvel bastion. This explosion is the largest yet. Ottoman engineers had packed the chamber with triple the normal powder charge. The entire bastion lifts into the air, hangs suspended for a heartbeat, then collapses into rubble. Dust clouds engulf the area. When visibility returns, a 100-foot gap opens in Vienna's defences. The breach exposes the inner city directly. Nothing stands between the Ottomans and Vienna's heart except debris and a handful of dazed defenders. Janissaries and Sipahi cavalry charge together through the massive gap. They expect to pour into the city unopposed. Instead, they encounter a prepared killing ground. Starhemberg had anticipated this bastion's fall and positioned artillery to cover the approach. 6 cannons loaded with grape-shot fire simultaneously into the packed Ottoman troops. Each cannon sprays hundreds of musket balls in a cone pattern. The effect resembles a giant shotgun blast. The leading edge of the assault simply evaporates. Bodies pile into mounds. Survivors stumble over corpses, losing momentum. A second volley cuts down the next wave. The attack stalls at the breach entrance. Infantry counterattack while Ottomans regroup. Starhemberg personally leads 800 men into the gap, pushing the enemy back beyond the walls. They fight for 3 hours amid the rubble, gaining and losing ground repeatedly. Neither side can establish control. Finally, darkness ends the battle. Both armies withdraw, leaving the breach contested but open. Engineers begin building an internal rampart behind the gap, creating a fallback position. The work continues through the night by torchlight. Ammunition stocks approach critical levels. Vienna began the siege with enough powder and shot for perhaps 2 months of sustained combat. 45 days later, reserves stand at less than 20%. Gunners receive orders to make every shot count. Artillery crews are forbidden from ranging fire. They must hit with the first shot or hold fire. Musketeers on the walls are ordered not to shoot unless they have clear targets within 50 yards. This restriction lets Ottoman troops approach closer before receiving fire, increasing danger to defenders. Staremberg orders church bells melted down and recast as cannonballs. This provides ammunition but destroys Vienna's identity. The bells had rung for centuries, marking time, announcing celebrations, warning of danger. Their voices defined the city's soundscape. Now they're pulled from towers and dragged to furnaces. The last bell from St. Stephen's Cathedral, which had rung since 1450, gets broken up on September 11th. Its metal will become 12 cannonballs. The silence afterward feels unnatural. Vienna had always had bells. Now it doesn't. Improvised ammunition fills the gap. Soldiers load cannons with chains, broken tools, nails, door hinges, anything metal that can be fired. These makeshift projectiles lack the accuracy and range of proper shot, but they're devastating at close quarters. A cannon loaded with chains fires like a massive scythe, cutting through multiple men simultaneously. The Ottomans learned to respect Viennese artillery even when it's firing scrap metal. Civilians join the defence out of necessity. Every man, woman and child capable of work receives assignments. Women carry ammunition from storage areas to the walls, making dozens of trips daily. Children pass messages between different sectors, running through streets under constant bombardment. Elderly citizens who can't fight pack sandbags, repair gabions and tend the wounded. No one remains idle. Idleness means death when every task matters. Some women take up weapons directly. A brewer's wife named Susanna takes her husband's musket after he's killed at the walls and continues his watch. She fires 23 shots over 2 days before dying from a sniper's bullet. A baker organises a group of women to dump boiling water and heated sand from the walls onto attacking troops. The superheated sand gets under armour and burns skin agonisingly. Several servants from noble households form a fire brigade that becomes legendary for extinguishing blazes under direct fire. We hope you have already subscribed to our channel, and if not, please do so right now. Our goal is to reach our first 1,000 subscribers. This is very important to us. Only on our channel will you find such interesting and unique stories about history's defining moments. Subscribe so you don't miss them, and we'll get back to the story. The Ottoman bombardment shifts tactics again on September 11th. Instead of targeting fortifications, gunners aim at the city's interior. They want to break civilian morale and create chaos that will prevent organised defence. Mortar rounds arc over the walls, exploding in residential areas. Buildings collapse randomly, burying families in rubble. Fires start across the city. The blazes spread unchecked because fire brigades can't be everywhere simultaneously. Entire blocks burn while defenders focus on holding the walls. Kara Mustafa receives troubling intelligence September 12th. His scouts report a relief army assembling northwest of Vienna near Tulln. The force includes Polish, German and Austrian contingents totaling perhaps 70,000 men. The Grand Vizier faces his first moment of genuine doubt. Should he lift the siege to confront this army in the open, or maintain pressure on Vienna while defending against relief forces? He chooses the latter. A portion of his army, roughly 25,000 troops, deploy to block the relief forces' approach. The rest continue the siege. Inside Vienna, hope flickers and dies repeatedly. Residents hear rumours of approaching relief for weeks. Every distant noise sounds like friendly cannon fire. Every unusual movement in the Ottoman camp suggests they're preparing to withdraw. These hopes prove false again and again. After 6 weeks of siege, most people stop believing in rescue. They accept that Vienna will fall and they will die or be enslaved. Starhemberg never stops believing. His scouts occasionally slip through Ottoman lines and return with confirmed reports. A relief army's coming. It's real, not rumour. The Count shares this information with his officers, but keeps it from ordinary soldiers and civilians. False hope breaks morale worse than no hope. He needs people to fight like they're doomed, because desperation produces better soldiers than optimism. The fortifications deteriorate daily. Sections collapse without Ottoman help, simply crumbling from accumulated damage. The walls were never designed to withstand weeks of modern artillery fire. Stone fractures. Mortar between blocks turns to powder. Internal structures crack under stress. Engineers shore up weak points with timber supports and earthworks, but they're delaying inevitable failure. Every morning brings reports of new cracks, new subsidence, new sections on the verge of collapse. September 13th brings the 13th major mine explosion. The blast destroys the small ravelin protecting the Schottentor gate. This gate provided the last functional entrance to the city. Its loss means Vienna is truly sealed. No one can enter or leave. Supply lines that no longer functioned anyway are now physically cut. The city exists as an isolated island in a sea of Ottoman troops. Every bite of food consumed cannot be replaced. Every bullet fired reduces the total available. Morale fractures among the defenders. 7 weeks of constant combat, inadequate food, spreading disease, and shrinking fortifications break men's spirits. Some soldiers desert their posts, hiding in cellars hoping to survive until the inevitable surrender. Others become reckless, taking suicidal risks because they've stopped caring whether they live or die. A few go insane from stress, babbling incoherently before being removed from the walls. Starhemberg executes deserters publicly to maintain discipline. He hates the necessity but sees no alternative. Compassion in this moment means collapse. 6 men caught abandoning their posts are hanged in the main square on September 13th. Their bodies are left hanging as a warning. The Count delivers no speech, no justification. The message needs no explanation. Everyone understands the stakes. The garrison is down to 4,000 men fit for combat. Another 2,000 can fight if absolutely necessary despite wounds or illness. Beyond that, only armed civilians remain. Perhaps 3,000 people with weapons but no real training. Against them, Kara Mustafa still commands over 100,000 troops immediately around Vienna. The numerical disparity makes victory impossible through conventional means. Starhemberg's only hope is to hold until relief arrives. If it arrives, when it arrives, it must arrive. September 14th marks 2 months since the siege began. Vienna has survived longer than most experts predicted. The city should have fallen weeks ago based on every calculation. That it still stands represents triumph of human will over mathematical certainty. But will has limits. Even the strongest spirit weakens eventually under sufficient pressure. The Ottoman camp celebrates prematurely. Officers distribute captured wine to their troops, confident Vienna's fall is imminent. Kara Mustafa drafts his victory dispatch to Sultan Mehmed, describing how he will present the keys to Vienna within days. His tent servants prepare his ceremonial armour for the triumphal entry. The Grand Vizier plans to ride through Vienna's streets in full regalia, accepting the formal surrender from whoever still lives. Inside the city, Starhemberg writes what he believes will be his final report to Emperor Leopold. The letter describes Vienna's desperate state with clinical precision. 4,000 defenders, 10 days of food at starvation rations, minimal ammunition, fortifications collapsing, no relief in sight. He concludes by promising that Vienna will not surrender while he lives. The city will be taken by storm over his corpse or not at all. He seals the letter and gives it to his most trusted courier with orders to break through at all costs. The messenger leaves that night. He makes it 300 yards before Ottoman cavalry cut him down. They find the letter and deliver it to Kara Mustafa. The Grand Vizier reads Starhemberg's assessment with satisfaction. 10 days of food means Vienna falls in 10 days. He orders intensified mining operations to accelerate the timetable. Why wait when the city teeters at the edge? But neither Starhemberg nor Kara Mustafa knows what's happening in the Vienna woods 15 miles northwest. Something that will change everything. Warsaw, Poland, August 1683. King Jan Sobieski reads Emperor Leopold's desperate plea for help. The letter describes Vienna's siege in stark terms and begs for Polish intervention. Sobieski is 54 years old, a career soldier who spent 30 years fighting Ottomans, Tatars, Cossacks and Swedes. He knows what Vienna's fall would mean. Poland shares a long border with Ottoman territories. If Vienna falls, Poland faces the empire alone with no buffer states between them. But knowing what must be done doesn't make it easy. The Polish nobility despise the Habsburgs. Austria had remained neutral during Poland's wars with Sweden and Turkey, offering no help when Poland needed allies. Now Leopold begs for Polish blood to save his capital. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Sobieski's nobles argue loudly against the campaign. Let the Austrians save themselves. Why should Polish soldiers die for people who wouldn't help Poland? Money creates another obstacle. Poland is nearly bankrupt after years of constant warfare. The treasury cannot afford to mobilize and supply an army for a foreign campaign. Sobieski uses his personal fortune to fund the initial mobilization, then borrows heavily from Jewish merchants and Catholic monasteries. He mortgages his family estates. The king gambles everything on saving Vienna, knowing that if the campaign fails, he'll be financially ruined and politically destroyed. The Polish Sejm, the noble parliament, meets in emergency session to debate the expedition. Arguments rage for 3 days. Some nobles see strategic necessity. Vienna must be saved or Poland is next. Others see only Austrian ingratitude and Habsburg manipulation. A faction proposes staying neutral and letting the Ottomans and Austrians bleed each other. Sobieski doesn't have time for extended debate. He invokes his authority as commander-in-chief and orders mobilization regardless of Parliament's approval. This technically violates Poland's constitution. The nobles can deal with that later if they survive. Mobilization begins across Poland on August 10th. Messengers ride to every major nobleman's estate with conscription orders. The Polish military system relies on noble cavalry, wealthy landowners who maintain private armies and answer the king's call during war. Each magnate must bring his troops, fully equipped and ready for campaign. Some comply immediately. Others delay, citing various excuses. Sobieski sends armed detachments to encourage cooperation. The winged hussars form the elite corps of Poland's army. These heavy cavalrymen wear distinctive wooden wing frames attached to their back armour. During charges, the wings create an eerie whistling sound and make the riders appear larger. But the wings serve a practical purpose too. They deflect lassos and prevent riders from being pulled from saddles. Each hussar owns several horses, allowing them to maintain devastating charge speed even during long campaigns. Their lances are 18 feet long, designed to outreach infantry pikes and skewer opponents before contact. Training a winged hussar takes years. The riders must master horsemanship, lance work, saber combat, and mounted archery. They wear armour that costs as much as a small farm, breastplates, helmets, and chainmail that can turn aside most weapons. Each hussar represents a substantial investment. Sobieski assembles 3,000 of these elite warriors for the Vienna campaign. They will form his decisive striking force. Additional troops come from Polish provincial forces. Lithuanian cavalry contingents join from the Eastern Territories. Cossack light cavalry volunteer for the campaign, seeing opportunity for plunder. German mercenaries in Polish service march west. By mid-August, Sobieski has assembled 18,000 troops, smaller than he'd like, but all he can field quickly. Every day's delay means Vienna grows weaker. The king addresses his army before departure. He doesn't appeal to humanitarian concerns or Christian brotherhood. He speaks in terms Polish nobles understand: glory, plunder, and strategic necessity. Vienna holds immense wealth that will be divided among the victors. The campaign offers chances for advancement and titles. More importantly, defeating the Ottomans here prevents fighting them in Poland next year. The speech works. Even reluctant nobles prepare to march. Sobieski's logistical planning shows his military genius. He knows the route to Vienna crosses difficult terrain with few supplies available locally. The army must be self-sufficient. Thousands of supply wagons accompany the force, carrying food, ammunition, fodder for horses, and spare equipment. Herds of cattle and sheep travel with the army as mobile food supplies. The entire column stretches 10 miles when moving, a logistical nightmare to coordinate but essential for maintaining combat readiness. The Polish army departs Warsaw on August 15th. They march south toward Krakow first, then west toward Vienna. The route covers 350 miles through mountains and forests. Sobieski pushes brutal marching schedules, 15 miles daily even through difficult terrain. Men and horses suffer from the pace. Stragglers fall behind constantly. The king leaves them. Speed matters more than keeping the force intact. Every hour counts. Meanwhile, Emperor Leopold scrambles to assemble a relief force from the fractured German principalities. The Holy Roman Empire exists in name only. Hundreds of independent states loosely connected through tradition and theoretical loyalty to the emperor. Each prince maintains his own army and pursues his own interests. Convincing them to contribute troops requires extensive negotiation. Bavaria sends 11,000 troops under its elector. Saxony contributes 9,000 men. Smaller contingents arrive from Swabia, Franconia, and various imperial cities. Duke Charles of Lorraine commands the Austrian forces that weren't caught in Vienna. He assembles 20,000 Austrian soldiers from garrisons across the empire. The combined German-Austrian force totals roughly 45,000 troops. Added to Sobieski's 18,000 Poles, the relief army numbers 63,000 men, still smaller than the Ottoman army, but large enough to fight. Command structure creates immediate problems. Leopold technically outranks everyone as emperor, but he's no military commander. Charles of Lorraine expects to lead the relief force based on seniority and experience. Sobieski arrives as an allied king, not an imperial subject, and refuses to accept orders from anyone. The three men meet at Tulln on September 5th to resolve command issues. Discussions become heated. Pride and protocol clash with military necessity. Charles argues that as the senior imperial general, he should command. Sobieski points out that Poland contributes the largest single national contingent, and he's actually fought the Ottomans successfully multiple times. Leopold wants to maintain overall control but recognizes he lacks tactical knowledge. The meeting deadlocks. Time is wasting while they argue about rank. Sobieski breaks the impasse with characteristic bluntness. He tells Leopold and Charles that Vienna will fall within days regardless of who commands the relief army. They can debate protocol or save the city. Choose. The king offers a compromise. He'll accept overall command passing to whoever reaches the battlefield first. Since his forces are freshest and fastest, this essentially guarantees Polish leadership without requiring the Germans to formally submit. Leopold accepts this face-saving solution. Charles swallows his pride and agrees. The relief army assembles at Tulln on September 6th to 7th. Units arrive in stages, taking assigned positions in the camp. The force represents the most diverse coalition assembled in Europe for decades. German Catholics fight alongside German Protestants despite their mutual hatred. Polish Catholics cooperate with Lutheran Saxons. Regional rivals camp beside each other. Old grievances and religious differences get temporarily set aside. The Ottoman threat unites enemies. Coordination problems plague the coalition immediately. Language barriers complicate every order. German officers don't speak Polish. Polish nobles barely speak German. Italian and French officers serving various princes add more linguistic confusion. Orders must be translated multiple times, creating delays and misunderstandings. Sobieski assigns bilingual officers to liaison positions, but communication remains problematic. Supply coordination creates worse headaches. Each contingent brought its own supplies organised by different standards. Bavarian wagons use different measurements than Saxon ones. Polish units calculate supplies in ways that baffle German quartermasters. No unified logistical system exists. The army must attack soon or the supply chaos will paralyse them. Intelligence gathering begins immediately. Scouts probe toward Vienna, trying to determine Ottoman positions and strength. Most scouts don't return. Ottoman cavalry patrols intercept them systematically. The few who survive report massive Ottoman forces surrounding Vienna with the siege nearly successful. They describe fortifications collapsing and constant bombardment. Vienna might fall before the relief army can intervene. Sobieski sends his most skilled scouts, Lithuanian Tatars who know Ottoman tactics intimately and can pass for Turkish soldiers at a distance. 3 reach Vienna's outskirts and observe the siege firsthand. They return on September 8th with detailed intelligence. The Ottoman army surrounds Vienna completely, but has deployed only 25,000 troops to defend against relief forces. The rest remain focused on the siege. This creates a vulnerability. If the relief army attacks quickly and concentrates force at one point, they might break through before the Ottomans can redeploy. The king studies maps obsessively. Vienna lies in a plain beside the Danube River. The Vienna Woods, a range of forested hills, extends northwest of the city. These hills offer the only covered approach to Vienna. Attacking across open ground would expose the relief army to Ottoman cavalry and artillery with no cover. But forcing an army through dense forest on steep slopes presents its own nightmare. Units will lose cohesion. Communication becomes impossible. Cavalry effectiveness drops to near zero in forest terrain. Sobieski decides the Vienna Woods route is the only option despite its difficulties. The alternative, crossing open ground, means suicide against superior Ottoman numbers. He orders detailed reconnaissance of forest trails and paths. Local guides are hired and interrogated extensively. Every possible route gets evaluated. The king determines that multiple parallel routes exist, allowing the army to advance on several paths simultaneously. This will maintain some tactical flexibility while accepting the chaos of forest movement. Battle plans develop through September 9th to 10th. The relief army will advance through the Vienna Woods on multiple routes. Once clear of the forest, they'll deploy on the Kahlenberg Heights overlooking Vienna from the northwest. These hills provide commanding views and artillery positions. From there, the army will attack downhill into the Ottoman positions. The plan is simple, because complex plans fall apart in battle. Move, deploy, attack. Timing becomes the critical factor. Vienna might collapse any day. The relief army needs every hour to assemble properly, but waiting risks arriving too late. Sobieski argues for immediate movement on September 10th. Charles and the German commanders want another day to organise supplies and coordinate movements. They compromise on September 11th as the attack date. This gives barely enough time for final preparations while hopefully not being too late for Vienna. Officers brief their units on September 10th. Soldiers learn they'll march through difficult terrain tomorrow to break an enemy siege. Many haven't fought Ottomans before. German infantry veterans of the 30 Years' War tell younger soldiers what to expect. Janissaries are professional soldiers equal to any in Europe. Ottoman cavalry is fast and deadly. Turkish artillery is excellent. This isn't fighting the French or Swedes. The Ottomans are different. Polish veterans share different advice with their units. Don't fear the Janissaries' reputation. They're good infantry, but not supernatural. The Sipahi cavalry is dangerous but can be broken by concentrated charge. Ottoman armies are massive but poorly coordinated. Their size is both strength and weakness. Most importantly, Poles have beaten Turks before and will do so again. The winged hussars have never lost a cavalry engagement when properly deployed. Soldiers spend the evening of September 10th preparing equipment and writing letters home. Many write farewells, assuming they'll die tomorrow. The odds aren't favourable. They're attacking a larger force in fortified positions. Casualties will be heavy regardless of victory or defeat. Men make peace with mortality, pray to various gods, and try to sleep despite nervousness. Sobieski doesn't sleep. He makes final adjustments to the battle plan, reviews intelligence reports, and meets with his senior commanders. The king carries enormous weight. His decision to march to Vienna has cost his personal fortune and risked his political position. If this battle fails, Poland is weakened financially and militarily with nothing gained. If Vienna has already fallen, the entire campaign is pointless. But if they succeed, if they break the Ottoman siege, the victory could shift the balance of power in Eastern Europe for generations. At midnight, guards wake the entire camp. Soldiers begin final preparations in darkness. Units form up and begin moving toward assembly points. The relief army starts its approach to Vienna. Ahead lies the Vienna woods, dense and dark. Beyond that, 150,000 Ottoman soldiers and a dying city. Time has run out for debate and preparation. Now comes the test. September 11th, 1683, 3 a.m. The relief army enters the Vienna woods in complete darkness. 63,000 men advance along narrow forest trails barely wide enough for 4 soldiers marching abreast. Trees block moonlight, turning the forest into a maze of shadows. Soldiers stumble over roots and rocks they cannot see. Horses balk at entering the darkness, requiring coaxing and sometimes force to move forward. The army splits into 3 main columns following parallel routes through the woods. Sobieski's Poles take the northernmost path. Charles of Lorraine's Austrians use the central route. The German contingents spread across the southern trails. This distribution prevents bottlenecks but creates communication nightmares. Commanders cannot see adjacent columns. They advance blind, trusting that parallel forces keep pace. Ottoman scouts detect the movement within the first hour. Turkish cavalry patrols observe large numbers of troops entering the forest and immediately send warnings to Kara Mustafa. The Grand Vizier receives the intelligence at dawn. He faces a decision that will determine everything. Does he lift the siege to concentrate forces against the relief army, or maintain pressure on Vienna while defending with his reserve force? Kara Mustafa chooses to continue the siege. His reasoning appears sound. Vienna will fall within days or even hours. Abandoning the siege now wastes 8 weeks of effort when success is imminent. His reserve force of 25,000 troops seems adequate to delay any relief attempt. The terrain favours defence. Ottoman soldiers can hold the hills and force the Christians to attack uphill from the forest. By the time the relief army fights through, Vienna will have surrendered. The Grand Vizier orders his reserve commander Ibrahim Pasha to block the approaches while the main army completes the siege. Inside Vienna, defenders wake to another day of bombardment without knowing help approaches. Starhemberg receives reports that all major bastions now have serious structural damage. The Berg bastion could collapse without another mine. The level bastion leans so severely that engineers fear it will fall inward, burying defenders. Ammunition stocks are down to 3 days at current consumption rates. Food supplies might last 1 week if rations are cut again, which seems impossible since people are already starving. A mine explodes at 6 a.m. beneath the Milka bastion. The detonation is poorly timed. The powder charge ignites prematurely, collapsing the tunnel before Ottoman troops can capitalize. But the explosion still damages the bastion's foundation. Cracks race up the structure. Engineers evacuate everyone from the position, expecting imminent collapse. Vienna loses another defensive strongpoint through attrition rather than assault. In the Vienna woods, the relief army makes frustratingly slow progress. The forest is denser than scouts reported. Ancient oaks crowd so close together that wagons cannot pass. Advanced troops with axes must clear paths wide enough for artillery and supply wagons to follow. This work is slow, noisy, and exhausting. Every felled tree must be dragged aside. Every cleared metre takes 5 minutes. The army advances at perhaps 1 mile per hour when they should be moving 3 times faster. Ottoman skirmishers harass the columns constantly. Small groups of Turkish soldiers fire from concealment, then melt back into the forest before Christians can respond. These attacks kill few but slow everything. Each ambush forces units to halt, deploy into defensive formation, clear the immediate area, then resume marching. The process consumes precious minutes repeatedly. Some Ottoman groups shadow the Christian advance for miles, attacking whenever opportunity presents. The northernmost column encounters a ravine that scouts fail to identify. The depression is 30 feet deep with steep sides and a stream at the bottom. Cavalry cannot cross. Artillery definitely cannot. The Polish vanguard commander faces a choice: find a way across or detour around, which might take hours. He orders engineers forward to construct a corduroy bridge using felled trees laid perpendicular to create a roadbed. The work takes until noon, halting the entire northern column for 5 hours. Charles of Lorraine's central column makes better progress on a slightly better trail. His advance guard consists of Croatian light infantry, who excel at forest fighting. They push through undergrowth that stops regular infantry, clearing a path for forces behind. The Croats also counterattack Ottoman skirmishers aggressively, driving them away from the column. By mid-morning, the Austrian force advances 2 miles into the woods while other columns lag behind. The German southern columns fragment badly. Various contingents take different trails based on incomplete coordination. Bavarian units end up ahead of Saxon troops who should be leading their sector. Franconian infantry become completely separated from their supply wagons. A Swabian artillery battery gets lost entirely, wandering down a game trail that dead ends at a cliff. These units must backtrack and find correct routes. The confusion costs hours and scatters the German contingent across miles of forest. Sobieski receives reports about the column separation at 10 a.m. His northern force is hours behind schedule. The centre is ahead of plan. The south is chaos. The army should be advancing as a coordinated mass, but instead moves as disconnected fragments. If the Ottomans attack now with concentrated force, they could defeat the columns piecemeal. The king sends mounted couriers racing between columns with orders to maintain pace regardless of other units' positions. Better to arrive scattered than not arrive at all. Lead elements of Charles's central column emerge from the Vienna woods at 1 p.m. They break from tree line onto the slopes of the Kahlenberg Heights and see Vienna for the first time. The city lies 4 miles distant, surrounded by the massive Ottoman camp. Smoke rises from fires inside the walls. Austrian soldiers can hear distant thunder of artillery. They've arrived while Vienna still stands, but barely. The race continues. Ottoman forward observers spot the Austrian emergence and send warnings down the line. Ibrahim Pasha deploys his 25,000 troops across the hills between the Vienna woods and the Ottoman siege lines. He positions janissaries in the centre with cavalry on the flanks. Artillery batteries unlimber on high ground. The Ottomans prepare to hold these positions while Kara Mustafa decides whether to continue the siege or redeploy his main army. The Grand Vizier refuses to lift the siege. He's watching Vienna's final collapse unfold. Another mine is ready to detonate beneath the Berg bastion. Once that explosion creates a breach, janissaries will pour through and the city falls. Kara Mustafa calculates he needs 6 more hours. Ibrahim's troops must hold that long. After Vienna surrenders, the entire Ottoman army can turn on the relief force and destroy it. The plan seems sound. Ibrahim has good positions and sufficient troops to delay 60,000 Christians for 6 hours. Austrian troops continue emerging from the forest through the afternoon. Charles of Lorraine establishes his command post on the Kahlenberg summit with clear views of the battlefield. He counts Ottoman positions and realizes they're outnumbered by the Christian relief force, but hold superior ground. Attacking uphill into prepared defences will cost heavily. He needs the Polish and German contingents to arrive before launching any assault. Sobieski's northern column reaches the forest edge at 3 p.m. The Poles emerge 2 miles north of the Austrian position, creating a gap in the Christian line. Ottoman cavalry immediately exploits this gap, charging between the two forces. Polish hussars counterattack, meeting Turkish sipahis in a vicious mounted melee on the hillside. The cavalry battle rages for an hour with neither side gaining advantage. Finally, the Poles drive the Turks back through sheer ferocity. The hussars' charge breaks the Ottoman cavalry, sending them fleeing downhill. This small victory opens the northern approach. German contingents dribble out of the forest in disconnected groups throughout the afternoon. Bavarians arrive first at 2:30 p.m. Saxons emerge at 3:15. Swabians don't appear until 4 p.m. The Franconian infantry who lost their supply wagons stumble onto the Kahlenberg at 4:30, exhausted and disorganized. The lost Swabian artillery battery never appears. They're still wandering the forest and will miss the entire battle. By 5 p.m. the relief army occupies the Kahlenberg Heights in a rough line stretching 3 miles. They're disorganized and exhausted from forcing their way through the Vienna woods. Many units haven't eaten since morning. Horses need water badly. Supply wagons are hours behind the main force, still struggling through forest trails. The army isn't ready for combat, but time has run out. Vienna cannot wait for optimal conditions. Inside the city, the afternoon brings disaster. The mine beneath the Berg bastion explodes at 4:30 p.m. The entire structure collapses into rubble, creating a breach 60 yards wide. Janissaries swarm through immediately. Starhemberg's reserves rush to contain them, but arrive too late. Ottoman troops establish a foothold inside Vienna's inner defences for the first time. Hand-to-hand fighting rages through the breach and into the streets behind. The city's fall appears imminent. Starhemberg personally leads a counterattack with his last reserve unit, 150 soldiers he'd been holding for absolute emergency. They hit the Janissaries from the side while the troops already engaged attack from front. The combined pressure stops the Ottoman advance but cannot drive them back. Fighting stabilizes with Turks holding the breach and approaches. Both sides feed reinforcements into the meat grinder. Casualties mount hideously. Bodies pile so high they obstruct movement. Kara Mustafa watches the breach battle from his command tent. He sees Janissaries inside Vienna's defences and believes victory is assured. Orders go to his assault troops. Press the attack everywhere. Storm all remaining bastions. End this today. Ottoman drums begin pounding along the entire siege perimeter. The signal for general assault. Every Turkish soldier surrounding Vienna prepares to attack simultaneously. The final storm is beginning. On the Kahlenberg heights, Sobieski hears the Ottoman drums. He understands what the accelerating rhythm means. Every minute's delay now dooms Vienna. The king sends galloping messengers to Charles and the German commanders with orders to attack immediately. No more waiting for stragglers or organising supplies. Attack now with whatever forces are present or watch Vienna fall while they organise. Charles objects. His troops need rest and proper deployment. Artillery isn't positioned correctly. Supply lines aren't established. Attacking now means attacking in chaos with exhausted soldiers. Sobieski overrules him. Chaos is better than arriving too late. The Polish king orders his own forces to prepare for immediate assault. If the Germans and Austrians won't move, Poland will attack alone. This threat forces Charles's hand. He cannot let the Poles fight alone regardless of tactical considerations. The Austrian commander orders his forces to prepare for attack. German princes receive similar orders. The relief army will assault downhill into Ottoman positions within the hour. Soldiers who'd been resting and catching their breath are roused and formed into attack formations. Officers who'd been planning tomorrow's battle suddenly must fight today. Ottoman observers watch the Christian army deploying and send warnings to Ibrahim Pasha. The relief force is preparing to attack, not settling into defensive positions for the night. Ibrahim must hold his position not for 6 hours, but right now. He orders his Janissaries to prepare for contact and sends urgent messages to Kara Mustafa describing the situation. The Grand Vizier must decide immediately. Continue the Vienna assault or redeploy troops to face the relief army. Kara Mustafa makes his final fatal decision. Continue the assault. Vienna is breaking. The breach is held. General attack is underway. 6 more hours and the city falls. Ibrahim's troops are sufficient to delay the Christians that long. Every calculation suggests this is correct. The Grand Vizier has overwhelming numerical superiority, better positions, and Vienna on the verge of collapse. Victory is assured if he holds his nerve. He holds. At 5:30 p.m., the Christian artillery begins firing. Guns that reach the heights start bombarding Ottoman positions below. The barrage is ragged and uncoordinated because batteries arrived at different times and operate independently. But the sheer volume of fire has an effect. Ottoman positions take casualties. Turkish soldiers who expected to hold hills passively suddenly face incoming artillery fire. Infantry begins descending the slopes at 6 p.m. Austrian regiments lead the attack in the centre. German contingents advance on the right. Polish infantry moves down the northern slopes. The entire relief army is in motion, rolling downhill toward Ottoman lines. They're tired, disorganised, and attacking in pieces rather than as a coordinated force. But they're moving, and that's what matters. Ottoman Janissaries open fire at 200 yards. Musket volleys cut through advancing Christian infantry. Men fall in rows. The attack staggers but doesn't stop. Christian soldiers close the distance, taking casualties the entire way. At 50 yards they charge. The two forces collide in brutal close combat. Pikes thrust against scimitars. Bayonets stab at Turkish soldiers who reply with axes and daggers. The fighting spreads across a 2-mile front. Neither side gains advantage in the infantry battle. Christians have momentum from charging downhill. Ottomans have prepared positions and tactical skill. The lines grind against each other, pushing forward and back without breakthrough. Casualties mount steadily on both sides. This stalemate could continue for hours, bleeding both armies white without decisive result. Everything depends on what happens next. The infantry battle has developed into exactly the kind of grinding attrition fight that favours the Ottomans' superior numbers. If this continues, the Christians will be ground down and forced to withdraw. Vienna will fall during the night. But Sobieski hasn't committed his main force yet. The winged hussars remain on the heights, watching and waiting. The king studies the battlefield, looking for the moment. Not yet. Almost. Wait. September 11th, 6:15 p.m. The infantry battle escalates into chaos across the hillsides below Vienna. Austrian regiments push forward 20 yards, then get driven back 30. German battalions gain temporary footholds only to lose them minutes later. The combat becomes a savage push-pull with no clear winner. Powder smoke drifts across the battlefield, obscuring vision and creating confusion. Units fire into the haze, unsure if they're hitting enemies or friends. Ottoman janissaries maintain disciplined formations despite pressure. They've trained for exactly this kind of close-quarters combat. 3-rank firing systems keep up constant musket volleys, while front ranks reload. Between volleys, they advance with tulwars and yataghans, cutting down isolated Christian soldiers. Their white felt caps and colourful robes become soaked with blood, their own and their enemies'. Still they hold. Inside Vienna, the battle at the Berg Bastion breach reaches critical intensity. Ottoman troops have pushed 50 yards into the city, capturing several buildings near the walls. Starhemberg's forces contest every street, every alley, every building. Musketeers fire from windows at Turks below. Janissaries storm buildings, fighting room to room. The Count knows that if this breach widens or if Ottomans establish a secure foothold, the city collapses tonight. He commits his absolute last reserves, wounded soldiers who can barely stand and armed civilians with minimal training. A 14-year-old apprentice brewer named Hans joins the defence at the breach. He carries his dead father's pike, a weapon longer than he is tall. Hans has never fought anyone. His hands shake so badly the pike vibrates. He follows older soldiers into the smoke and noise, terrified beyond thought. An Ottoman soldier appears through the haze. Hans thrusts the pike forward instinctively. The blade catches the Turk in the chest. The man falls, blood spreading across his robes. Hans stares at what he's done, frozen. Another defender shoves him forward. Keep moving, or die here. The general Ottoman assault against Vienna's entire perimeter begins at 6:30 p.m. Thousands of Turkish soldiers charge every remaining bastion simultaneously. Scaling ladders go up against walls across the city. Defenders spread thin, trying to cover everything. The bombardment intensifies, with Ottoman gunners firing as fast as they can load. Several buildings inside Vienna catch fire, adding to the chaos. On the Kahlenberg heights, Sobieski watches the infantry battle develop below. His tactical genius sees what others miss. The Ottoman line is curved backward under Christian pressure, creating a slight concave shape. More importantly, Ottoman cavalry has moved from the flanks toward the centre to reinforce the janissaries. This leaves the Ottoman left wing, the northern section facing Sobieski's Poles, weakened. The defensive line there consists mainly of provincial infantry, decent fighters but not elite troops, and they're tired from a full day of skirmishing. The king orders his cavalry to prepare. 18,000 horsemen begin forming up along the ridge, The winged hussars take position in the front ranks. Behind them, Lithuanian cavalry, Polish panzerni, and Cossack light horse organise into wedge formations. This isn't a line charge. It's a massed column designed to punch through a single point with overwhelming force. The cavalry deployment takes 30 minutes, which feels like forever while infantry dies below. Ottoman observers see the cavalry massing but misinterpret the threat. Ibrahim Pasha assumes the horsemen are preparing to descend and support the infantry battle. He doesn't recognise a breakthrough formation. His experience fighting Ottomans in the east didn't include facing Polish heavy cavalry. Turkish Sipahis are excellent light cavalry, fast and deadly in raids and pursuits, but they've never encountered winged hussars in a full charge. Ibrahim doesn't understand what's about to hit him. At 7 p.m, Sobieski gives the order. The cavalry begins moving down the slopes in tight formation. They start at a walk, maintaining formation on the uneven ground. Horses pick their way carefully down the hillside. The riders lean back in their saddles to compensate for the downward angle. The formation stays compact, shoulder to shoulder, a moving wall of men and horses. The Ottoman left wing sees the cavalry coming and prepares to receive them. Infantry forms square formations, the standard defence against cavalry, tight blocks of soldiers with pikes and muskets facing outward. These squares can withstand most cavalry charges by presenting a hedge of pike points that horses won't enter. Ottoman commanders feel confident. They've broken cavalry charges before using these exact tactics. But the Polish cavalry doesn't behave like ordinary horse. They maintain formation on terrain that should break them apart. As they reach flatter ground, the pace increases to a trot. Still, the formation holds. The wings on the hussars' backs begin generating their distinctive sound, a low whistling that grows louder as speed increases. Ottoman infantry soldiers hear it and feel their first tremor of doubt. That sound is wrong. It drills into the mind. At 300 yards, the cavalry accelerates to a canter. The ground shakes from thousands of hooves hitting simultaneously. Dust clouds rise behind the formation. The whistling intensifies into an eerie shriek. The hussars lower their 18-foot lances to horizontal. From the Ottoman perspective, a forest of lance points extends ahead of a wall of armoured horsemen that fills the entire visible area. There's no gaps, no weak points, just mass and speed and those terrible wings. At 150 yards, the charge reaches full gallop. The formation explodes into thunder. Horses running flat out, carrying armoured men and levelled lances. The impact speed will be roughly 20 miles per hour, which doesn't sound fast until one realises that means 1,700 pounds of horse and rider hitting at that velocity. The kinetic energy is devastating. Physics becomes weaponized. The Ottoman infantry squares hold formation for a moment. Then the soldiers in the front ranks break. They've fought their entire lives but have never seen anything like this. The combination of speed, mass, sound, and visual impact is psychologically overwhelming. Men in the rear ranks push forward trying to maintain formation, while front ranks try to flee. The squares collapse into mobs. Some soldiers run, others freeze. A few fire muskets wildly without aiming. The Polish cavalry hits like an avalanche. The lances strike first, each one punching completely through the first soldier it hits, and often the second or third behind. Then the horses crash into the mass of men. Ottoman soldiers are bowled over, trampled or knocked aside. The cavalry doesn't stop. The momentum carries them through the first ranks, the second, the third. They're not fighting individuals. They're ploughing through human obstacles like a ship through waves. The hussars discard their lances after the initial impact. The weapons are too long and unwieldy for close combat. They draw sabres and continue the charge, cutting down anyone in reach. Behind them, lighter cavalry pours through the gap, expanding the breakthrough. The Ottoman left wing doesn't fall back, it disintegrates. Units fragment into individuals running for their lives. Officers trying to restore order are ridden down or killed by their own panicking troops. Ibrahim Pasha sees his left wing collapse in minutes and comprehends his disaster. The Christian cavalry has punched completely through his defensive line. Worse, they're not stopping to consolidate gains. They're continuing the charge, driving straight toward the Ottoman siege lines around Vienna. If they reach those positions, the entire siege becomes threatened from the rear. Ibrahim sends desperate messages to Kara Mustafa. The relief force has broken through. The siege must be abandoned. The army must redeploy immediately. The Grand Vizier receives this news at 7:30 p.m. while watching Vienna's defences crumble. The breach at the Berg Bastion has widened. Ottoman troops control several city blocks inside the fortifications. The general assault is succeeding elsewhere with Turks atop the walls in 3 locations. Kara Mustafa faces impossible choices. If he continues the siege, Vienna falls tonight, but his army gets attacked from behind. If he abandons the siege to face the relief force, Vienna survives, and 8 weeks of effort are wasted. Every instinct tells him to finish what he started. Vienna is breaking. Victory is minutes away. He orders the siege to continue. Messages go to his reserve forces. Stop the Christian cavalry at all costs, but do not, under any circumstances, pull troops away from the assault on Vienna. The city must fall tonight. After that, the entire Ottoman army will turn on the Christians and destroy them. This decision seems logical given the information available, but it's wrong. Kara Mustafa still doesn't grasp how completely his left wing has collapsed, or how devastating a cavalry breakthrough can be. Sobieski's cavalry doesn't slow after breaking the Ottoman line. The formation has fragmented during the charge, impossible to maintain tight order through combat, but the general momentum continues downhill toward Vienna. Different cavalry units peel off to attack Ottoman positions from behind. Hussars hit a Janissary regiment from the rear, cutting it to pieces before the Turks can react. Lithuanian cavalry overruns an artillery battery, killing the gunners and spiking the cannons. Cossacks rampage through the Ottoman supply areas, burning tents and scattering camp followers. The psychological impact exceeds the physical damage. Ottoman soldiers besieging Vienna suddenly hear combat behind them. They turn to see their own camps burning and Christian cavalry charging through positions that should be secure rear areas. Panic spreads. If the enemy has gotten behind them, maybe they're surrounded, maybe the relief force is larger than reported, maybe the siege has failed. These thoughts multiply through thousands of minds simultaneously. Inside Vienna, defenders on the walls see the cavalry break through. They can't identify specific units, but they recognize a general melee developing in the Ottoman camp. Something has changed. The besiegers are fighting someone behind their lines. Hope flickers in Viennese hearts for the first time in weeks. Starhemberg hears the reports and immediately orders a sortie. Vienna's garrison will attack outward, while the relief force attacks inward, catching the Ottomans between 2 forces. The Count leads 3,000 soldiers, everyone who can possibly fight, out through the breaches and gates. They charge into Ottoman siege positions with desperate fury. Turkish soldiers besieging the walls suddenly face attack from inside the city they're trying to capture. The Ottoman assault on Vienna stalls as units must defend themselves rather than attack. The entire dynamic of the siege reverses in minutes. Kara Mustafa finally understands his mistake at 8 p.m. Reports flood his command tent describing chaos throughout his army. The left wing is destroyed. The siege lines are compromised. Christian cavalry is running wild in his rear areas. The Viennese garrison has sortied and is attacking from inside the city. His army fights on 2 fronts while spread around Vienna's entire perimeter. The Grand Vizier has lost control of the battle. His numerical superiority means nothing when his forces are scattered and disorganized. He orders a general withdrawal. Ottoman units must disengage from Vienna and form new defensive lines. But transmitting this order to 150,000 troops spread across miles of siege positions takes time. Some units receive the order and pull back. Others never get it and continue attacking. Still others retreat without orders, creating cascading panic. The withdrawal becomes a rout in some sectors, while other areas maintain discipline. The Janissaries holding the Berg Bastion breach refuse to retreat. They fought for hours to take this position and won't abandon it without direct orders from their officers. Those officers are dead or missing. The Janissaries continue fighting, now surrounded on three sides as Viennese troops press from multiple directions. Their discipline is extraordinary but futile. By 9 p.m. the last Janissaries in the breach are killed or captured. Vienna's fortifications are secured. Ottoman artillery batteries attempt to cover the withdrawal, but many are overrun before they can limber their guns. Christian cavalry captures dozens of cannons intact. Bavarian infantry occupies abandoned siege trenches, turning Ottoman engineering works against their builders. The siege infrastructure that took weeks to construct falls into Christian hands in hours. The retreat accelerates as darkness falls. Ottoman soldiers stream away from Vienna in increasingly disorganized masses. Some units maintain formation and conduct fighting withdrawals. Others simply run. The cavalry tries to screen the retreat, but Polish hussars and German riders pursue aggressively. Running battles erupt across the darkening landscape. Ottoman casualties mount steadily. Kara Mustafa establishes a temporary defensive line 3 miles from Vienna near the village of Schwechat. Units that maintained discipline rally at this position. He still commands perhaps 50,000 organised troops plus thousands of stragglers filtering back. This force could theoretically defend against pursuit, but the Grand Vizier's authority has evaporated. Officers question his orders. Soldiers desert in groups. The Ottoman army is no longer a cohesive force, but a mob held together by tradition and fear of worse alternatives. The Christian forces halt their pursuit around 10 p.m. Soldiers are exhausted from a full day of marching and fighting. Horses need rest and water desperately. Darkness makes further advance dangerous. They might stumble into prepared Ottoman positions. Sobieski orders his army to consolidate around Vienna rather than risk a night battle. They've won the day. No need to gamble that victory in darkness. Polish and Austrian troops enter Vienna at dusk. The population emerges from cellars and shelters, crying, cheering, praying. Women kiss soldiers' hands. Men embrace strangers. Children who haven't smiled in weeks laugh and dance. The relief is physical. The siege is broken, but also emotional. Vienna believed itself doomed and has been suddenly saved. The reversal is too dramatic to process rationally. People celebrate through tears and exhaustion. Sterenberg meets Sobieski at the city gates just after 10 p.m. The Count is filthy, wounded in 3 places, and hasn't slept in 36 hours. Sobieski looks equally battered despite spending the day on horseback rather than fighting hand-to-hand. The two men embrace without words. What could be said that would match the moment? Vienna has survived the unsurvivable. The relief force arrived with perhaps hours to spare. Success balanced on a knife edge, and somehow they survived the crossing. Emperor Leopold remains in Passau, 80 miles away, still not knowing the battle's outcome. Messengers gallop through the night carrying news of victory. They'll reach him tomorrow morning. The emperor will return to Vienna and take credit for the victory despite fleeing weeks ago. Politics continues regardless of who fought and died. Inside the Ottoman camp, Kara Mustafa sits in his tent surrounded by captured luxuries that now mean nothing. His career is over. He knows Ottoman tradition. Successful generals are rewarded, failed ones are executed. Sultan Mehmed will not forgive losing the army in the siege after 8 weeks of promises. The Grand Vizier begins burning sensitive documents and securing his personal wealth. If he survives the next few weeks, he'll need money for exile or bribery. Vienna's celebrations continue through the night despite exhaustion. Fires are lit in every square. Church bells that weren't melted for ammunition ring continuously. Wine appears from hidden cellars. Residents had concealed private stocks during rationing. Soldiers drink and eat for the first time in 24 hours. The combination of victory, relief and alcohol creates euphoria bordering on hysteria. But the war isn't over. The Ottoman army has retreated, not surrendered. Kara Mustafa still commands tens of thousands of troops. They could regroup and counterattack. The victory is dramatic but incomplete. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. Tonight belongs to celebration because tomorrow might bring death. The survivors take what joy they can from this impossible moment. September 12th, 1683, 4 a.m. Ottoman troops abandon their defensive line at Schwechat under cover of darkness. Kara Mustafa orders a full retreat toward Hungary before the Christian forces can organize a coordinated pursuit. The withdrawal happens in stages. Rearguard units hold positions while the main body moves back. Then those units leapfrog to new positions while others cover. This is professional military retreat, not panicked flight, but it's still retreat from a siege that should have succeeded. Scouts bring news of the Ottoman withdrawal to Sobieski at dawn. The king immediately orders pursuit. Every hour the Turks gain increases their chances of escaping intact. If the Ottoman army reaches Hungarian territory with most of its strength preserved, they can rebuild and threaten Vienna again next year. This victory only matters if it destroys Ottoman offensive capability permanently. Half measures accomplish nothing. Charles of Lorraine argues for caution. The Christian army is exhausted, scattered, and low on supplies. Many units haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Horses are blown from the charge and need rest. Artillery is still being dragged down from the Kahlenberg heights. A hasty pursuit could walk into an Ottoman ambush. Better to consolidate the victory, resupply properly, and pursue in organized fashion. Sobieski overrules him again. Organized enemies escape. Disorganized enemies get destroyed. The Ottoman army is vulnerable now, today, this morning. Tomorrow they'll be stronger. Next week they'll be dangerous again. The king orders immediate pursuit with whatever forces can move. Units still organizing can catch up later. Speed matters more than coordination. Polish cavalry leads the pursuit at 7 a.m. The hussars who charged yesterday mount fresh horses and ride east following the Ottoman trail. This isn't difficult tracking. 150,000 retreating soldiers leave roads churned to mud, abandoned equipment scattered everywhere, and stragglers easy to capture and question. The cavalry advances at a canter, eating up miles while the Ottoman rearguard withdraws ahead of them. Inside Vienna, the true cost of the siege becomes visible in daylight. 3 major bastions are reduced to rubble piles. The walls have breaches every few hundred yards. Entire neighborhoods are burned to foundations. Bodies lie everywhere, in the streets, on the fortifications, buried in collapsed buildings. The smell is overpowering. Thousands of corpses have been rotting in summer heat for days or weeks. Disease will spread rapidly unless the dead are buried immediately. Starhemberg organizes mass burial details. Every available person not actively defending or treating wounded gets assigned to corpse removal. They work in teams, dragging bodies to collection points, then loading them on carts for transport to mass graves outside the walls. The work is horrific. Many bodies have been dead for weeks, decomposing into unrecognizable masses. Others are so fresh that blood still pools around them. Workers vomit constantly but continue. Leaving bodies unburied guarantees plague. The Count orders a census of Vienna's population. When the siege began, roughly 50,000 civilians and 16,000 soldiers defended the city. The census finds 38,000 civilians and 4,000 soldiers still alive. That means 24,000 dead, nearly a third of Vienna's total population. Some died in combat. More died from disease, starvation, or collateral damage from bombardment. Every family has lost someone. Every street has multiple empty houses. The city survived but is hollowed out. Food becomes the immediate crisis. Vienna's stocks are completely exhausted. The last bread was distributed yesterday. No meat remains. Even rats have been eaten. The Christian Relief Force brought some supplies, but not enough to feed 40,000 starving people, plus their own army. Emergency grain shipments must come from Lower Austria and Bohemia, but those will take days to arrive. People who survived 8 weeks of siege might die from hunger now that salvation has come. 10 miles east of Vienna, Polish cavalry catches the Ottoman rearguard at the town of Schwechat. The Turkish delaying force consists of 5,000 Sipahi cavalry and 2,000 janissaries. They've taken defensive positions in the town itself, using buildings for cover. The Poles could bypass them and continue pursuing the main Ottoman army, but leaving an intact force behind invites disaster. Sobieski's advance guard commander decides to attack immediately. The assault on Schwechat begins at noon. Polish hussars charge directly into the town along the main street. This is insane tactics. Cavalry charging into an urban area where defenders can fire from windows and rooftops. But the psychological impact of the previous day's charge still affects Ottoman morale. Turkish soldiers see the hussars coming and many break before contact. The janissaries hold but are isolated when the cavalry abandons them. After 30 minutes of brutal close combat, the janissaries surrender. The town is taken. The victory at Schwechat yields unexpected prizes. Ottoman commanders had used the town as a staging area for their baggage train. Hundreds of wagons full of supplies, ammunition and loot from the Hungarian campaign sit abandoned in warehouses. Polish soldiers discover gold coin, silk fabrics, weapons and food stores. They also find something more valuable: detailed maps showing the Ottoman army's planned retreat route and supply depots along the way. This intelligence allows the pursuit to anticipate Ottoman movements. Kara Mustafa learns of Schwechat's fall by mid-afternoon. The loss of supplies and the persistent pursuit force him to accelerate the retreat. He orders non-essential baggage abandoned to increase marching speed. Thousands of tents, cooking equipment, and personal belongings are dumped beside the road. The army strips down to soldiers, weapons, and minimal supplies. This increases movement rate, but also reduces the army's ability to sustain itself during a long retreat. The main Christian army departs Vienna September 12th at 2 p.m. German and Austrian contingents march east in a loose column stretching 5 miles. They're following the Polish cavalry's path, marked by abandoned Ottoman equipment and occasional burning buildings. The infantry moves slowly due to exhaustion and the need to keep pace with artillery. They'll be lucky to cover 10 miles today. But they're moving, maintaining pressure, preventing Ottoman forces from resting or regrouping. By evening, the Ottoman army reaches Fischermende, 15 miles from Vienna. Kara Mustafa attempts to establish a defensive position to allow his troops rest. But Christian cavalry appears on the horizon before the Turks can fortify. The Grand Vizier realizes he cannot stop anywhere near Vienna. The pursuit is too close, too aggressive. He orders continued retreat through the night. Soldiers who haven't slept since the battle must march in darkness, while Christian forces rest comfortably behind them. September 13th brings disaster for the retreating Ottomans. Their army is fragmented into multiple columns moving at different speeds. The fastest units are miles ahead. The slowest, burdened with wounded and remaining supplies, lag dangerously behind. This creates gaps where pursuing Christian forces can strike isolated formations. Polish cavalry exploits these opportunities ruthlessly throughout the day. A Lithuanian cavalry regiment catches an Ottoman supply column at dawn near Brucken-der-Lethe. The convoy consists of 400 wagons guarded by 1,000 provincial troops. The Lithuanians number only 300 riders but attack anyway. The surprise is complete. Most Ottoman guards flee without fighting. The Lithuanians capture the entire convoy: food, ammunition, medical supplies, and chests of silver coin destined to pay Ottoman troops. This loss cripples Kara Mustafa's ability to supply his army during retreat. More Ottoman stragglers are captured throughout September 13th. Small groups of Turkish soldiers, separated from their units during the confused retreat, surrender to Christian patrols. These men are exhausted, hungry, and demoralized. They provide intelligence about the main Ottoman force. It's heading toward Pressburg on the Hungarian border, roughly 40 miles from Vienna. Kara Mustafa hopes to reach friendly territory, where he can reorganize and resupply. Hungarian reaction to the Ottoman defeat creates unexpected problems for the retreating army. Hungary is technically Ottoman territory, conquered during previous wars. But Hungarian nobles resent Ottoman overlordship and see the Vienna defeat as an opportunity. As Turkish forces retreat through Hungarian lands, they receive no local support. Villages refuse to sell food. Guides provide false information. Some Hungarian irregulars actively harass the Ottoman column, attacking stragglers and supply wagons. Sobieski's pursuit force reaches Brucken-der-Lethe on September 14th. The town sits at the border between Austria and Hungary. Crossing into Hungarian territory technically means invading Ottoman-controlled lands, which could have diplomatic implications. The king doesn't hesitate. His cavalry forges ahead, pursuing the Ottoman army deeper into Hungary. Politics can be sorted later. Destroying this army takes priority over diplomatic niceties. The Polish cavalry makes first contact with the main Ottoman force on September 15th near Pressburg. Kara Mustafa has established a defensive position on hills outside the city. His army, reduced to perhaps 80,000 effective troops through casualties and desertion, occupies strong ground with artillery support. The Grand Vizier intends to make a stand here, inflicting casualties on the pursuing Christians to discourage further pursuit. If he can bloody them badly enough, they might break off the chase. Sobieski arrives with his cavalry and evaluates the Ottoman position. It's strong, too strong for cavalry alone to assault. But the main Christian infantry force won't arrive for 2 more days. Every day of delay allows the Ottomans to strengthen defences and rest their troops. The king faces a dilemma: attack now with inadequate forces and risk defeat, or wait for infantry and risk losing the Ottoman army entirely when they slip away during the night. He chooses a middle option: demonstrate against the Ottoman position without committing to full assault. Polish cavalry advances to within artillery range, drawing Ottoman fire. Turkish guns open up, expending ammunition on targets that withdraw, before taking serious damage. For 6 hours the Poles feint and probe, keeping the Ottomans focused and nervous without actually attacking. The psychological pressure prevents rest while conserving Christian strength for later. Kara Mustafa recognizes what Sobieski is doing but cannot ignore the threat. If he doesn't respond to the cavalry demonstrations, they might discover weaknesses in his position. If he does respond, he wastes ammunition and exhausts his troops. The Grand Vizier is trapped in a no-win situation. He holds position through September 15th and 16th, but his army deteriorates daily from stress, hunger, and desertion. The main Christian army arrives on September 17th. Now Sobieski has infantry, artillery, and cavalry combined, a complete combined arms force numbering roughly 60,000 troops. The Ottoman army still outnumbers them, but the psychological balance has shifted. Turkish soldiers see the Christian force growing daily while their own army shrinks. They've been retreating for 6 days, suffering constant harassment and supply problems. Morale collapses visibly. Kara Mustafa decides to retreat again rather than risk battle. His position is strong, but his army is brittle. A defeat here would mean annihilation far from friendly territory. Better to continue withdrawing toward the safety of Ottoman territories deeper in Hungary. On the night of September 17th, the Ottoman army abandons its positions and resumes retreat. They leave behind artillery pieces too heavy to move quickly and wounded soldiers who cannot march. The pursuit continues through late September. Christian forces shadow the Ottoman retreat, attacking isolated units and capturing supply convoys. The pattern repeats daily. Ottomans march, Christians pursue, small battles erupt, Ottomans continue retreating. Neither side has strength for decisive battle, but neither will disengage. The pursuit becomes a long-running catastrophe for the Ottoman army, bleeding strength continuously without hope of recovery. By September 25th, the Ottoman army crosses into Ottoman-controlled Serbia. Kara Mustafa has led his forces back to territory where they can resupply and reorganize. The Grand Vizier technically succeeded in extracting most of his army from a disastrous situation, but the force that entered Austrian territory in July numbered 150,000. The army that reaches Serbia counts 60,000. Nearly 90,000 soldiers are dead, captured or deserted. All artillery was lost. All supplies were abandoned. The Ottoman Empire's main field army has been gutted. Christian forces halt at the Ottoman border. They've pursued for 2 weeks and covered over 200 miles. Supplies are exhausted. Soldiers need rest. Horses are breaking down from constant movement. Sobieski reluctantly orders the pursuit ended. His forces have accomplished their mission. Vienna is saved and the Ottoman army is destroyed as an offensive threat. Continuing deeper into Ottoman territory risks overextension and defeat. The king leads his army back toward Vienna, arriving on October 1st. The city has partially recovered in 3 weeks. Bodies are buried, some buildings are being repaired. Food supplies flow regularly now. The population begins returning to normal life, though normal will never be what it was before the siege. Vienna has been fundamentally changed by the experience. Emperor Leopold finally enters Vienna on October 5th, 3 weeks after the battle. He'd remained in Passau throughout the fighting, claiming he was organizing reinforcements and coordinating strategy. Now he returns to accept credit for the victory. The emperor greets Sobieski coldly, jealous of the Polish king's role as Vienna's saviour. Leopold treats Charles of Lorraine as the victory's primary architect despite Charles arriving after Sobieski and contributing less to the actual battle. The political aftermath begins immediately. Leopold wants Polish forces out of Vienna as quickly as possible. Their continued presence reminds everyone who actually saved the city. Sobieski recognizes the insult but accepts it with grace. He's accomplished what he came for. The Ottoman threat is neutralized and Poland is safe. Personal recognition means less than strategic success. The Polish army departs Vienna on October 10th, marching home to celebrations in Warsaw. Vienna begins the long process of recovery. Reconstruction will take years. The psychological scars will last generations. But the city survived what should have destroyed it. That survival becomes part of Vienna's identity, the city that held against impossible odds. The siege transforms Vienna from a provincial Habsburg capital into a symbol of European resistance to Ottoman expansion. In Constantinople, Sultan Mehmed IV receives news of the disaster in mid-October. His fury is volcanic. The Grand Vizier promised him Vienna and delivered catastrophic defeat instead. Mehmed orders Kara Mustafa recalled to Constantinople immediately. The Sultan's message is brief: explain yourself or die. Kara Mustafa knows there is no explanation that will satisfy. Failed Ottoman commanders face one punishment: death. September 12th, 1683, 5 a.m. Christian forces prepare for the final assault while dawn breaks over the battlefield. Ottoman positions stretch in a defensive arc protecting what remains of their siege works around Vienna. Kara Mustafa has approximately 60,000 troops in these lines: janissaries in the centre, provincial infantry on the flanks, cavalry in reserve. The Grand Vizier believes this position can hold against the Christian relief force long enough for Vienna to surrender. His calculations assume the Christians will attack with infantry in traditional fashion, grinding against Ottoman defences until one side exhausts itself. Sobieski has different plans. The king spends the early morning hours positioning his forces for something unprecedented: a coordinated combined arms assault culminating in the largest cavalry charge in history. Austrian and German infantry will pin the Ottoman centre with frontal attacks. Artillery will suppress Turkish guns. Then, when the Ottoman line is fully engaged and cannot manoeuvre, 18,000 cavalry will charge the weakened Ottoman left flank and roll up their entire position. The battle opens at 6 a.m. with artillery duel. Christian guns on the Kahlenberg heights fire down into Ottoman positions. Turkish batteries reply, but elevation disadvantage reduces their effectiveness. The bombardment continues for 2 hours, neither side gaining decisive advantage but both expending ammunition at alarming rates. Smoke drifts across the battlefield, mixing with morning mist to reduce visibility to a few hundred yards in places. Austrian infantry advances at 8 a.m. 20,000 soldiers descend from the heights in columns that deploy into battle lines as they reach flat ground. They march toward Ottoman positions with drums beating and flags flying. Ottoman janissaries wait behind prepared defences, earthwork parapets, sharpened stakes, and pre-ranged artillery zones. The Austrians walk into a killing ground. Ottoman musket volleys shred the Austrian front ranks at 100 yards. Men collapse in rows. The advance staggers but continues. At 50 yards, Austrian soldiers break into a charge. They hit the Ottoman earthworks and the battle becomes savage hand-to-hand combat. Austrians try to climb the parapets while janissaries stab down at them with pikes and fire point blank with muskets. The Austrian attack bogs down in brutal stalemate within minutes. German contingents attack on the Austrian right at 8:30 a.m. Bavarian and Saxon infantry repeat the same assault with similar results. They reach Ottoman defences, get pinned down by fire and begin grinding attrition battle. Neither side retreats but neither advances. The infantry combat settles into a mutual bloodbath that will continue for hours unless something breaks the stalemate. Inside Vienna, Starhemberg hears the battle and orders another sortie. Vienna's garrison launches its third attack in 24 hours against Ottoman siege positions. These Turkish troops are already demoralised from yesterday's disaster. Many surrender immediately rather than fight. Others retreat without orders. The sortie pushes Ottoman forces back from the walls, capturing siege trenches and abandoned equipment. Kara Mustafa watches the Christian infantry attacks develop and feels confident. His janissaries are holding. The Austrian and German assaults are being contained with acceptable casualties. If this continues all day, the Christians will exhaust themselves against Ottoman defences. Then he can counterattack with fresh reserves and drive them back to the Vienna woods. The plan seems to be working exactly as predicted. But Sobieski isn't committing his main strength to the infantry battle. The Polish king keeps his cavalry in reserve, watching and waiting. He's using Austrian and German infantry as bait, fixing Ottoman attention on the centre while preparing his decisive blow elsewhere. At 9 a.m., Sobieski orders his cavalry to begin forming for the charge. This evolution takes over an hour as 18,000 horsemen organise into attack formation. The winged hussars form the spearhead, 3,000 heavy cavalry in tight wedge formations. Their armour gleams in morning sunlight. The wooden wing frames attached to their backs create distinctive silhouettes visible for miles. Behind them, Polish panzerny cavalry and Lithuanian horsemen mass in supporting waves. Cossack light cavalry and German riders take positions on the flanks. The entire formation extends nearly a mile wide and several hundred yards deep. It's the largest cavalry force assembled in Europe for over a century. Ottoman observers see the cavalry massing, but Kara Mustafa doesn't react appropriately. He's focused on the infantry battle happening right now, not the threat developing on his flank. His cavalry reserves are positioned centrally, ready to counter-attack a breakthrough in his main line. They're not positioned to stop a massive charge against his left wing. This positional error will prove fatal. At 10 a.m., Sobieski completes his deployment. The king personally positions himself at the front of the winged hussars. At 54 years old, he's too valuable to risk in a cavalry charge. His advisors beg him to command from the rear. Sobieski refuses. Polish kings lead from the front. It's tradition, and it's necessary for morale. The soldiers need to see their king sharing their danger. He will charge with his men, or not at all. The Austrian and German infantry battles intensify at 10:30 a.m. to draw maximum Ottoman attention. Fresh German regiments throw themselves at Janissary positions. The fighting becomes desperate. Austrian soldiers finally force a small breach in Ottoman earthworks and pour through. Janissary's counterattack immediately pushing them back. The breach is sealed, but the combat's intensity fixes every Ottoman eye on the centre. No one watches the flanks carefully. Sobieski raises his sabre at 11 a.m. The signal passes down the cavalry line. 18,000 horsemen tighten their grips on lances and reins. Horses sense their riders' tension and stamp nervously. The wind shifts, blowing from behind the Christian position toward the Ottomans. This puts dust and smoke in Turkish faces during the charge. Even nature seems to favour the attack. The cavalry begins moving at 11:15 a.m. They start at a walk, maintaining tight formation while descending the slopes. The wings on the hussars create their distinctive whistle, quiet at walking speed but growing steadily louder. Ottoman soldiers on the left flank hear the sound and turn to look. They see the largest cavalry formation most have ever witnessed beginning to move in their direction. At the slope's base, roughly 800 yards from Ottoman positions, the cavalry accelerates to a trot. Formation remains perfect despite the increase in speed. Officers ride beside their units, maintaining intervals and alignment. The ground trembles from thousands of hooves hitting simultaneously. The whistling intensifies into an eerie shriek that drills into the mind. Ottoman left flank commander orders his troops into defensive formations. Provincial infantry forms squares, tight blocks designed to repel cavalry with hedge of pike points. These formations work against ordinary horsemen but face a challenge of scale. The squares number perhaps 15,000 men total. The cavalry charging them numbers 18,000. Simple mathematics suggests the squares will be overwhelmed even if they fight perfectly. At 500 yards, the cavalry reaches canter speed. The formation flows across the ground like a living wave. Individual riders are barely visible within the mass, just a wall of horses, armour, and levelled lances extending across the entire field of vision. The wings shriek continuously now. The sound combines with thunder of hooves to create overwhelming sensory assault even before physical contact. Ottoman infantry in the squares watch the charge approach with growing dread. These are experienced soldiers who fought in a dozen campaigns. They've faced cavalry before, but they've never seen anything like this. The scale, the speed, the sound, the perfect formation maintained at gallop speed. Every professional instinct tells them this cannot be stopped by infantry squares. They're dead men standing in formation waiting for death to arrive. At 300 yards, the charge reaches full gallop, 20 miles per hour. 1,700 pounds of horse and armoured rider multiplied by 18,000. The kinetic energy is devastating. Physics dictates the outcome before lances strike flesh. The hussars lower their 18-foot lances to horizontal. From Ottoman perspective, a forest of lance points extends ahead of the wall of horses. There's no gaps anywhere, no way to avoid what's coming. The front ranks of the Ottoman infantry break at 150 yards. They simply turn and run. These aren't cowards. They're rational men refusing to die pointlessly. The middle ranks see the front runners fleeing and waver. Officers scream orders to hold formation. Some soldiers obey, others break. The squares begin disintegrating before contact. The Polish cavalry hits the Ottoman line at 11:30 a.m. The impact sounds like thunder. 18-foot lances punch completely through the first man, the second, sometimes the third or fourth. The sheer momentum carries the charge through the first ranks instantly. Horses crash into human bodies, bowling them over or trampling them flat. The cavalry doesn't slow. They plough through the Ottoman infantry like a ship through waves. The hussars discard their lances after initial impact. The weapons are too unwieldy for close combat, and many break on impact anyway. They draw sabres and continue forward, cutting down anyone within reach. The charge isn't pretty or skillful. It's raw violence delivered with overwhelming force. Ottoman soldiers are killed, crippled, or scattered aside. The ones who survive do so by pure luck or by running fast enough. Behind the hussars, lighter cavalry pours through the breach. They spread left and right, expanding the breakthrough laterally. The Ottoman left wing doesn't fall back in organised retreat. It explodes into fragments. Units lose cohesion completely. Officers lose control of their men. What was a defensive line becomes thousands of individuals running for their lives in different directions. Kara Mustafa sees his left wing collapse and comprehends his disaster. The Christian cavalry has punched through in minutes. Worse, they're not stopping to consolidate. The charge continues, driving straight toward his centre and his command post. If they reach the Janissary positions from behind, his entire army gets caught between cavalry attacking from the rear and infantry attacking from the front. The battle is lost unless he acts immediately. The Grand Vizier orders his cavalry reserves forward. 10,000 Sipahi horsemen charge to intercept the Polish hussars. This should work in theory. Cavalry against cavalry, numbers roughly equal, Ottoman riders on fresh horses while Polish mounts have just completed a devastating charge. But theory doesn't account for momentum and morale. The hussars have just shattered an infantry formation and feel invincible. The Sipahis are charging into the teeth of that success. The two cavalry forces collide at 11:45 a.m. The impact is catastrophic for the Ottomans. Polish hussars are heavier, better armoured, and still have forward momentum despite the initial charge. They hit the Sipahis like a hammer striking glass. Turkish cavalry formations shatter on contact. Individual riders duel briefly before the Poles overwhelm them through superior equipment and sheer aggression. The Sipahi charge breaks apart within minutes. Ottoman janissaries in the centre realise they're being flanked. Polish cavalry is behind them. Austrian infantry attacks from the front. The Vienna garrison sorties from the left. They're surrounded on three sides with only one retreat route remaining. Janissary discipline holds. They begin conducting fighting withdrawal rather than collapsing into rout. But orderly retreat under pressure from 3 directions is nearly impossible. Units become separated. Formations fragment. The withdrawal becomes increasingly chaotic. German cavalry joins the pursuit at noon. They've been waiting in reserve and now pour forward to exploit the breakthrough. Combined with Polish riders, nearly 25,000 Christian horsemen rampage through Ottoman positions. They capture artillery batteries, overrun supply dumps, and chase down fleeing soldiers. The Ottoman army is disintegrating not just tactically but psychologically. Soldiers conclude the battle is lost and save themselves rather than die for a defeated cause. Kara Mustafa orders general retreat at 12:30 p.m. All Ottoman forces must disengage immediately and withdraw to rally points 3 miles east. Getting this order to all units during the chaos of battle proves impossible. Some units receive it and pull back in relatively good order. Others never get the word and continue fighting until destroyed or surrounded. Still others retreat without orders, creating cascading panic that spreads through adjacent units. The Ottoman camp around Vienna empties in early afternoon. Soldiers abandon siege works they spent 8 weeks constructing. Artillery pieces are left behind, too heavy to move quickly during retreat. Tons of supplies, ammunition, and equipment are dumped because speed matters more than salvaging material. The camp followers, merchants, craftsmen, slaves, and families who accompanied the army flee in terror, creating refugee streams that clog the roads. Christian forces enter the Ottoman camp at 2 p.m. and discover incredible wealth. Kara Mustafa's personal tent contains silk carpets, gold vessels, and chests of coins. Other tents hold plundered treasures from the Hungarian campaign. Food stores that could have fed Vienna for months sit in warehouses. Weapons, armour, and military equipment lie scattered everywhere. The camp is a treasure trove worth millions in modern currency. Soldiers begin looting immediately despite officers' attempts to maintain discipline. Polish, German, and Austrian troops compete for the best plunder. Fights break out over particularly valuable items. The victory celebration turns partly into riot as soldiers claim their spoils. Officers eventually restore order, but not before thousands of troops are thoroughly drunk on captured wine and loaded with stolen goods. The pursuit of retreating Ottoman forces continues through the afternoon. Christian cavalry chases Turkish soldiers for miles. Stragglers are cut down or captured by the hundreds. The retreat becomes a massacre in some areas where Ottoman troops get trapped against rivers or in dead-end valleys. Casualties mount steadily without any significant fighting, just pursuit and slaughter of defenceless men. By sunset, the battlefield is secured. The Ottoman army has fled east toward Hungary, leaving behind perhaps 15,000 dead plus all artillery, supplies and siege equipment. Christian casualties are significant, maybe 4,000 dead and twice that number wounded. But the exchange rate is devastating for the Ottomans. They've lost their army, their siege, and their offensive capability in a single afternoon. Vienna is saved. The relief force achieved its objective with hours to spare before the city's inevitable collapse. The siege that should have conquered Vienna and opened the path to Western Europe instead became the Ottoman Empire's greatest disaster in decades. The Battle of Vienna will reshape European power dynamics for generations, but in the moment, exhausted soldiers simply celebrate survival and count their plunder while the sun sets on the bloodiest day many have ever witnessed. September the 12th, 1683, 6 p.m. The Ottoman retreat accelerates into chaos as darkness approaches. Kara Mustafa attempts to establish rally points where scattered units can regroup, but communication has broken down completely. Officers don't know where their men are. Soldiers don't know where their officers went. The army fragments into thousands of small groups, each choosing its own escape route based on panic rather than strategy. Christian cavalry pursues relentlessly until darkness makes further advance dangerous. They've chased fleeing Ottomans for 6 hours, killing thousands and capturing even more. Polish hussars finally halt their horses 10 miles from Vienna, the animals literally unable to continue. Some horses collapse from exhaustion and die on the spot. The riders dismount and rest where they stopped, too tired to care about shelter or food. Inside Vienna, the population emerges from cellars and fortifications as news of victory spreads. People stream into the streets despite the late hour. They light bonfires in every square, burning anything flammable in spontaneous celebration. The city that faced imminent destruction hours ago now explodes with joy. Strangers embrace, families reunite, churches overflow with people offering prayers of thanksgiving. Staremberg walks the fortifications at sunset, inspecting the damage. The Berg Bastion is rubble. The Lowell Bastion has a 50-foot gap. Every major defensive work shows serious structural damage. Vienna's walls protected the city long enough but barely. Another week of siege would have meant certain collapse. The Count realizes how close they came to annihilation. Not days close, but hours close. The margin between survival and destruction was thinner than anyone outside the city understood. The Count orders inventory of remaining supplies. The results are shocking even to him. Vienna has enough food for 2 days at starvation rations. Ammunition stocks would have lasted perhaps 3 more days of combat. Medical supplies are completely exhausted. Surgeons are reusing bandages and operating without anaesthetic because none remains. The city held until literally the last possible moment. Any delay in the relief forces' arrival would have meant surrender or massacre. Bodies still litter the battlefield as night falls. Thousands of dead lie where they fell, in the breach zones, along the walls, scattered across the approaches to Vienna. The corpses create a landscape of death visible even in darkness. Groans from wounded soldiers echo across the field. Some are Christians who fell during the day's fighting. More are Ottoman soldiers abandoned during the retreat. They lie in darkness calling for help that won't come. Burial parties begin work at first light September 13th. Christian soldiers are carried to consecrated ground for proper burial. Ottoman dead are dumped in mass graves without ceremony. The sheer number of corpses overwhelms the burial teams. They work for 3 days straight and still don't finish. Eventually they resort to burning bodies because digging graves takes too long. Pyres smoke continuously for a week, filling Vienna with the stench of burning flesh. The plunder from the Ottoman camp exceeds anything the Christian forces expected. Detailed inventory reveals the stunning wealth Kara Mustafa brought to Vienna. Gold coins worth millions in modern currency filled dozens of chests. Silk fabrics from Persia and China stack in warehouses. Weapons and armour of exquisite craftsmanship lie abandoned. The Grand Vizier's personal tent alone contains treasures worth a small kingdom's annual revenue. Food supplies in the Ottoman camp could have fed Vienna for 6 months. Warehouses hold grain, dried meat, rice, and other staples in massive quantities. The irony is devastating. Viennese residents starved while Ottoman besiegers sat on mountains of food just outside the walls. The discovered supplies are immediately distributed to Vienna's population, finally ending the famine after 8 weeks. Sobieski tours the Ottoman camp on September 13th and is stunned by what he finds. The scale of plunder suggests Kara Mustafa was preparing for permanent occupation rather than simple conquest. The Grand Vizier brought furnishings for palaces, equipment for governing, and supplies for establishing long-term administration. This wasn't a raid or even a battle. It was an attempt at colonization. The Ottomans intended to transform Vienna into a Turkish city and use it as a base for conquering the rest of Europe. The king discovers something else in the camp: thousands of Christian slaves chained in pens. These prisoners were captured during the Ottoman advance through Hungary and intended for sale in Constantinople's slave markets. Men, women and children from dozens of villages sit in filth, starving and diseased. Sobieski orders them freed immediately. The liberation reveals the Ottoman campaign's brutality. This wasn't just military conquest, but systematic enslavement of conquered populations. Polish soldiers find Kara Mustafa's battle standard, a massive green banner embroidered with gold verses from the Quran. The standard represents the Ottoman Sultan's authority, and losing it is considered catastrophic dishonor. Its capture symbolizes the completeness of Ottoman defeat. Sobieski sends the banner as a gift to Pope Innocent XI, who had provided financial support for the relief campaign. The trophy will hang in Rome for centuries as a reminder of Christianity's victory over Islam. The plunder distribution creates immediate problems. Everyone wants the best items. Polish troops claim priority because they led the cavalry charge that won the battle. German soldiers argue they suffered higher casualties in the infantry fighting and deserve compensation. Austrian forces insist the battle was fought to save their city, and they should receive the larger share. The bickering threatens to fracture the coalition. Sobieski proposes a solution: divide plunder by percentage based on each nation's contribution to the army. Poland contributed 18,000 troops, so receives 30% of captured wealth. Germans provided 28,000 soldiers and get 45%. Austrians brought 15,000 men and received 25%. This formula is imperfect and satisfies no one completely, but prevents the dispute from escalating into violence. The distribution takes weeks to complete. Individual soldiers keep whatever they personally looted during the initial capture of the Ottoman camp. This means some common soldiers suddenly possess wealth beyond their wildest dreams. A Polish hussar finds a chest of gold coins in an abandoned tent and becomes richer than minor nobility overnight. A German musketeer discovers silk worth a year's wages wrapped in an Ottoman officer's baggage. These personal fortunes transform lives, but also create jealousy and resentment among soldiers who found nothing valuable. The pursuit of Ottoman forces resumes September 14th once Christian cavalry rests and regroups. Scouts report the Turkish army has retreated to Pressburg, 40 miles east. Kara Mustafa is attempting to reorganize his shattered forces and establish a defensive line. The Grand Vizier still commands perhaps 70,000 troops, a substantial force but demoralized and lacking supplies. If allowed to escape to Ottoman territory, this army could rebuild and return. Sobieski argues for aggressive pursuit to destroy Ottoman offensive capability permanently. Charles of Lorraine wants to consolidate around Vienna and let the Turks retreat unmolested. Emperor Leopold, still in Passau, sends messages urging caution. The strategic debate continues while precious time slips away. Finally, Sobieski takes independent action. His Polish forces will pursue regardless of what Germans and Austrians do. This forces the coalition to move or be left behind. The Christian army marches east on September 15th in a loose column stretching for miles. They travel light, leaving heavy artillery and supply trains in Vienna. Speed matters more than firepower in a pursuit. Cavalry ranges ahead, tracking the Ottoman retreat and harassing stragglers. Infantry follows at forced march pace, covering 15 miles daily despite exhaustion. Ottoman rearguard fights several small battles during the retreat. Turkish cavalry attempts to delay Christian advance by holding key terrain features, river crossings, mountain passes, fortified towns. These delaying actions work temporarily but cannot stop the pursuit. Christian forces bypass some obstacles and overwhelm others. The Ottomans gain hours or days but not enough time to escape. Desertion ravages the Ottoman army during retreat. Soldiers who fought loyally during the siege abandon their units once defeat becomes clear. Provincial troops from distant territories slip away to return home. Even some janissaries desert, a shocking breach of their legendary discipline. By September 18th, Kara Mustafa's army has shrunk to 50,000 effectives through desertion alone, without Christian forces inflicting additional casualties. Supply problems cripple the Ottoman retreat. The army abandoned most provisions during the flight from Vienna. Local populations refused to provide food to the retreating troops. Hungarian peasants, technically Ottoman subjects, see the defeat as opportunity to resist. They hide their harvests, deny guides, and sometimes ambush small Turkish detachments. The Ottoman army marches through hostile territory, with inadequate supplies and no local support. Christian forces catch the Ottoman rearguard at the town of Petronell on September 20th. A brief but vicious battle erupts when Polish cavalry charges Turkish delaying forces. The Ottomans hold for 2 hours before breaking. 3,000 Turkish soldiers are killed or captured. The rest retreat in disorder, abandoning equipment and wounded. This small victory accelerates Ottoman demoralization. Kara Mustafa receives increasingly desperate messages from Sultan Mehmed during late September. The Sultan demands explanation for the Vienna disaster. He wants to know why the Grand Vizier failed when success seemed certain. Mehmed's letters grow progressively more threatening. The final message, arriving September 25th, is brief. Return to Constantinople immediately to face judgment. The Grand Vizier understands what this means. Failed commanders face execution. The Ottoman army crosses into Serbian territory on September 28. Kara Mustafa has led the remnants of his force, perhaps 40,000 soldiers, back to Ottoman-controlled lands. The retreat covered 300 miles in 16 days, a brutal march that killed thousands through exhaustion, disease and harassment. The army that invaded Austria numbered 150,000. The force that survives counts barely 1/4 that number. Christian pursuit halts at the Ottoman border. The coalition army is exhausted, undersupplied, and operating far from its bases. Continuing into Ottoman territory risks overextension and potential disaster if Turkish forces regroup. Sobieski reluctantly orders halt. His forces have accomplished their mission. Vienna is saved and the Ottoman army destroyed as an offensive threat for years to come. The Polish king returns to Vienna on October 1st. The city is transformed during his absence. Debris is cleared from major streets. Emergency repairs shore up damaged fortifications. Food markets operate normally for the first time in 2 months. Vienna is returning to life, though the scars of siege will remain visible for decades. Emperor Leopold enters Vienna on October 5th, nearly a month after the battle. He'd remained in Passau throughout the fighting, claiming he was coordinating strategy and organizing reinforcements. His return is carefully staged. Triumphal procession through decorated streets, formal ceremonies at St. Stephen's Cathedral, public appearances calculated to emphasize imperial authority. Leopold positions himself as the victory's architect despite fleeing before the siege began. The emperor greets Sobieski coldly at their official meeting. Leopold is jealous of the Polish king's role as Vienna's saviour and resentful that foreign troops saved Habsburg capital. He treats Charles of Lorraine as the victory's primary hero despite Charles commanding the less successful infantry assault. The snub is deliberate and obvious. Sobieski recognizes political reality. He won the battle, but Leopold controls the narrative. Leopold offers minimal thanks for Polish assistance and hints strongly that Polish forces should return home soon. Their continued presence in Vienna makes uncomfortable political statement about who actually saved the city. Sobieski understands he's no longer welcome despite being Vienna's liberator. He begins preparations for departure, hiding his anger behind diplomatic courtesy. The Polish army leaves Vienna on October 15th. Soldiers march north toward Poland loaded with plunder from the Ottoman camp. They're returning as heroes and wealthy men. The campaign cost Polish lives and treasure, but delivered exactly what Sobieski promised: security. The Ottoman Empire won't threaten Poland for a generation after this defeat. Vienna celebrates its deliverance with 3 days of public festivities starting October 20th. Religious services thank God for the miracle. Feasts utilize supplies captured from the Ottomans. Concerts and theatrical performances mark the city's survival. But underneath the celebration runs awareness of how close they came to annihilation. Vienna survived not through strength, but through fortune, timing, and Sobieski's cavalry charge arriving at the exact moment when the city teetered at collapse. The siege's psychological impact on Vienna's population will last for generations. Children who survived grow up with trauma from starvation, bombardment, and constant fear of death. Adults suffer nightmares about the siege for decades afterward. The city develops obsessive focus on fortifications and military preparedness. Vienna will never again allow itself to be caught unprepared. The 1683 siege transforms the city's character permanently. Captured Ottoman equipment transforms Vienna's military capabilities. Hundreds of cannons, thousands of muskets, and tons of gunpowder fell into Austrian hands. This windfall allows Leopold to rearm his forces without massive expenditure. The captured weapons will be used against the Ottomans in future campaigns, adding insult to the defeat. But the most valuable capture isn't material, it's intelligence. Ottoman battle plans, strategic documents, and diplomatic correspondence found in Kara Mustafa's tent reveal the empire's strategic situation. The documents show internal divisions, supply problems, and diplomatic weaknesses. This intelligence will guide Austrian strategy for years, helping transform tactical victory into strategic advantage. The Battle of Vienna marks a turning point not just for Austria but for all of Europe. The Ottoman Empire's aura of invincibility shatters. European states that feared Turkish power for centuries suddenly see vulnerability. The psychological shift is profound. Islam's military superiority no longer seems inevitable. Christian Europe begins considering offensive action rather than defensive survival. December 25th, 1683. Belgrade. Kara Mustafa Pasha kneels in a tent surrounded by executioners. The Grand Vizier has been recalled to face Sultan Mehmed IV's judgment for the Vienna disaster. There will be no trial, no opportunity for defense, no mercy. Ottoman tradition is clear. Commanders who lose battles of this magnitude pay with their lives. The executioner's silk cord, reserved for high-ranking officials as a mark of respect, wraps around Kara Mustafa's neck. He dies by strangulation, his body left unburied for 3 days as warning to other failures. The execution sends shockwaves through the Ottoman military command. Every general and admiral understands that defeat now means death regardless of circumstances. This creates a culture of extreme caution, where commanders refuse to take necessary risks. Officers prioritize personal survival over strategic objectives. The Ottoman military, already demoralized from Vienna, becomes paralyzed by fear of failure. Sultan Mehmed replaces Kara Mustafa with a series of Grand Viziers who prove equally ineffective. The position becomes a death sentence. 3 Grand Viziers are executed or deposed within 2 years. No competent commander wants the job when failure guarantees execution. The Ottoman government descends into chaos as leadership changes constantly, and no one can implement long-term strategy. Vienna's victory inspires Pope Innocent XI to organize a formal coalition against the Ottomans. He calls it the Holy League, positioning the alliance as Christian crusade against Islamic expansion. The timing is perfect. The Ottoman Empire appears vulnerable for the first time in decades. European states that previously avoided confrontation now see opportunity for territorial gains. Austria joins the Holy League in March 1684. Emperor Leopold recognizes that Vienna's relief created temporary advantage that must be exploited immediately. If Austria allows the Ottomans time to recover, they'll return stronger. Leopold mobilizes his armies for offensive operations into Ottoman-controlled Hungary. The strategy reverses 2 centuries of Austrian defensive posture against Turkish expansion. Poland formally enters the Holy League in April 1684. King Jan Sobieski argues that pushing the Ottoman border farther from Poland increases long-term security. His nobles remain skeptical. They see defending Vienna as protecting Poland, but offensive wars in Hungary benefit Austria more than Poland. Sobieski overrides their objections, committing Polish forces to the coalition despite domestic opposition. Venice joins the League in May 1684, driven by commercial rather than religious motivations. The Venetian Republic has been slowly losing Mediterranean trading posts to Ottoman expansion for decades. The Vienna victory suggests Ottoman weakness that can be exploited. Venice contributes its powerful navy and experienced amphibious forces, targeting Ottoman-held islands and coastal territories. Russia becomes the League's 4th major member in 1686 after 2 years of negotiation. Tsar Peter I sees opportunity to expand Russian territory at Ottoman expense, while the Turks are weakened. Russia's entry transforms the Holy League from European coalition into genuinely international alliance. The Ottomans now face enemies on 4 fronts simultaneously: Austria in Hungary, Poland in Moldavia, Venice in the Mediterranean, and Russia in the Ukraine. The coordinated offensive begins summer 1684. Austrian forces invade Hungary, targeting Ottoman fortresses along the Danube. The campaign succeeds beyond expectations. Turkish garrisons, demoralized after Vienna, surrender rather than fight. Towns that resisted Habsburg rule for decades open their gates to Austrian troops. Duke Charles of Lorraine, commanding the Austrian army, recaptures Buda after 145 years of Ottoman occupation. Polish armies push into Moldavia and Podolia, territories the Ottomans had conquered from Poland decades earlier. Sobieski personally leads several campaigns, demonstrating the cavalry tactics that won Vienna. Ottoman forces in these regions are weak and scattered. Polish advances are rapid and relatively bloodless. The Turks simply withdraw rather than contest territory they can't hold. Venice attacks Ottoman possessions in Greece and the Aegean. The Venetian navy dominates the Mediterranean, blockading Ottoman ports and cutting supply lines. Amphibious operations capture key islands and coastal fortresses. The famous Venetian general Francesco Morosini conquers the Peloponnese Peninsula, dealing the Ottomans humiliating defeats in their own backyard. His forces even briefly hold Athens, damaging the Parthenon during bombardment, an act of cultural destruction that will be regretted for centuries. Russian armies invade Ottoman territories in the Ukraine and Crimea. The campaigns are brutal, with both sides committing atrocities. Russian forces burn Ottoman supply depots and massacre garrisons. Turkish troops respond with similar violence against captured Russians. The Eastern Front becomes the war's bloodiest theatre, though geographically distant from the conflict's origins in Vienna. The Ottoman Empire fights desperately on all 4 fronts, but cannot concentrate forces effectively. Moving armies between theatres takes months, and by the time reinforcements arrive, the situation has changed. The Ottomans' vast size, previously an advantage, becomes a liability. They must defend an enormous perimeter against multiple enemies, while their own logistics and command structure crumble. Internal problems compound military defeats. The Ottoman economy, strained by decades of constant warfare, approaches collapse. Inflation soars as the government debases currency to pay for military expenses. Tax revenues decline as war disrupts trade and agriculture. Corruption spreads through the bureaucracy as officials steal whatever they can before the empire falls. The state begins disintegrating from within while enemies attack from without. Sultan Mehmed IV becomes increasingly erratic as defeats accumulate. He blames advisors, executes officials on suspicion of disloyalty, and retreats into hunting and pleasure while the empire crumbles. His disconnection from reality grows so severe that in 1687 the army revolts and deposes him. Mehmed is imprisoned, and his brother Suleiman II becomes sultan. The coup demonstrates how completely Vienna's defeat has undermined Ottoman institutions. The new sultan attempts reforms but faces impossible circumstances. The treasury is empty. The army is demoralized. Provincial governors ignore Constantinople's orders. Subject populations rebel, seeing Ottoman weakness as opportunity for independence. Suleiman can't fix problems this fundamental while fighting a forefront war. The best he achieves is slowing the empire's decline rather than reversing it. Austrian forces continue advancing through Hungary from 1685 to 1687. They employ systematic siege tactics against Ottoman fortresses, using mining and bombardment techniques identical to those the Turks used against Vienna. The irony is deliberate. Austrian commanders explicitly model their operations on Ottoman methods. Major fortresses fall one by one: Esztergom, Székesfehérvár, Pécs. Each capture extends Austrian control deeper into formerly Ottoman territory. The Battle of Mohacs in August 1687 delivers another devastating Ottoman defeat. Austrian and Hungarian forces destroy a Turkish army attempting to defend southern Hungary. The battle occurs at the same location where the Ottomans crushed Hungarian forces in 1526, beginning their conquest of Hungary. The 1687 battle reverses that disaster, with Ottomans fleeing in disorder after losing thousands. The symbolic significance matches the tactical victory. Christian forces have avenged a defeat from 161 years earlier. Poland's campaigns in Moldavia achieve mixed results. Sobieski wins several battles, but can't fully conquer the region due to logistical problems and limited resources. Polish nobles increasingly resist funding the war, seeing it as draining Poland's wealth for minimal gain. Sobieski's health deteriorates during the campaigns. He's in his late 50s, and the constant campaigning exhausts him. He continues leading from the front, but with diminishing effectiveness. Venice achieves spectacular successes in Greece from 1684 to 1688. Morosini's forces conquer the Peloponnese, Athens, and numerous Aegean islands. These victories are celebrated in Venice with triumphal ceremonies and official honours. But the conquest proved temporary. Venice lacks the resources to hold territories so distant from its base. The Greek campaigns deliver glory but not lasting strategic advantage. Russia's war in the south proceeds slowly but steadily. Russian forces besiege Azov in 1695 and 1696, finally capturing this key Ottoman fortress on the Sea of Azov. The victory gives Russia its first warm water port and access to the Black Sea. This strategic gain proves more durable than battlefield victories. Russia will retain this territory and build upon it for centuries. The cumulative effect of these campaigns transforms the strategic balance in Eastern Europe. By 1690, the Ottoman Empire has lost most of Hungary, significant territories in the Balkans, and numerous Mediterranean possessions. The empire that threatened to conquer Europe in 1683 now fights desperately to maintain what it still holds. The reversal takes only 7 years from Vienna's relief to Ottoman near collapse. Peace negotiations begin in 1697 after 14 years of continuous warfare. both sides are exhausted financially and militarily. The Ottomans have lost decisively, but retain significant military capability. The Holy League has achieved its primary objectives but cannot destroy the Ottoman Empire completely. Continuing the war risks diminishing returns or even reversal of fortunes. Diplomacy becomes more attractive than continued fighting. The negotiations occur at Karlowitz, a town in modern Serbia, starting January 1699. Representatives from Austria, Poland, Venice, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire gather to formalize the new territorial arrangements. The talks are contentious. Every side wants maximum advantage and gives concessions reluctantly. But the outline is clear. The Ottomans will cede most conquered territories in exchange for peace. The Treaty of Karlowitz is signed September 26, 1699. Austria receives Hungary, Transylvania, and most of Croatia and Slovenia. Poland regains Podolia and parts of Ukraine. Venice keeps its conquests in the Peloponnese and Dalmatia. Russia retains Azov and surrounding territories. The Ottoman Empire loses approximately 200,000 square miles of European territory, roughly the size of Spain. The treaty marks the first time the Ottoman Empire cedes significant territory in a peace agreement. For 3 centuries, Ottoman treaties either expanded the empire or maintained existing borders. Karlowitz reverses this pattern. The psychological impact equals the territorial losses. The Ottoman Empire's image of invincibility is shattered permanently. The treaty announces to the world that the Turks can be defeated and forced to surrender conquered lands. Vienna's role in triggering this transformation becomes clear in retrospect. The 1683 siege's failure didn't just save one city, it initiated a cascade of consequences that reshaped European geopolitics. The battle destroyed Ottoman offensive capability, inspired formation of the Holy League, and enabled 16 years of successful campaigning that drove the Turks from Central Europe. A single day's cavalry charge on September 12th, 1683 altered the trajectory of empires. The cultural impact rivals the political and military consequences. Coffee enters European culture from captured Ottoman supplies after Vienna's relief. Legend claims a Polish officer, Jerzy Franciszek Kulczycki, who spoke Turkish and served as spy during the siege, receives coffee beans as reward and opens Vienna's first coffee house. The story is probably false, but reflects coffee's association with Vienna's salvation. Within decades, coffee houses become central to European urban culture. Croissants supposedly originate from Vienna after 1683, designed to resemble the Ottoman crescent and celebrate victory over the Turks. This story is also probably myth. Similar pastries existed before 1683. But the legend persists because it captures the siege's cultural resonance. Everyday items become memorials to the moment Europe stopped Ottoman expansion. Military tactics evolve from Vienna's lessons. The battle demonstrates combined arms warfare's effectiveness, infantry fixing enemy positions while cavalry delivers decisive blow. This principle influences European military thinking for the next century. The winged hussars' charge becomes legendary, studied in military academies as example of perfectly executed cavalry assault. Polish cavalry's dominance continues until firearms technology makes heavy cavalry obsolete. Fortification design changes in response to the siege. Vienna's medieval walls barely survive despite Renaissance-era upgrades. Military engineers across Europe study the siege to improve defensive architecture. New fortification designs emphasize lower profiles, multiple defensive lines, and improved artillery positions. The star fort design becomes standard, replacing older wall systems that proved vulnerable to mining and bombardment. The siege enters European cultural memory as a defining moment when Christian civilization stopped Islamic expansion. This narrative simplifies complex reality. The conflict involved politics, economics, and territorial ambitions as much as religion. But the religious framing dominates historical memory. Vienna 1683 becomes shorthand for civilizational conflict, invoked in political rhetoric for centuries. The Ottoman Empire never recovers its pre-1683 power. The empire survives another 220 years until World War I, but always in decline. Subsequent sultans attempt reforms, modernization, and revitalization. Some achieve temporary success, but the fundamental trajectory is downward. The empire that besieged Vienna loses territory continuously until it collapses entirely in 1922. The siege marks the beginning of this long decline. Vienna transforms from vulnerable frontier city to European cultural capital. The Habsburg Empire's survival and expansion after 1683 enables Vienna's golden age in the 18th century. The city becomes center of music, art, and intellectual life. The siege's memory contributes to Viennese identity. They're the people who held against impossible odds. This self-image influences the city's culture for centuries. Jan Sobieski returns to Poland a hero but finds limited reward. His nobles never fully appreciate his strategic vision. They resent the war's costs and his Habsburg alliance. Sobieski rules until his death in 1696, but his last years are marked by political frustration and declining health. He's remembered in Poland as great military leader but unsuccessful political reformer. His tomb inscription calls him king who saved Vienna and terrified the Ottomans. Accurate summary of his mixed legacy. Emperor Leopold I consolidates Habsburg power after Vienna's relief and successfully transforms near disaster into foundation for expansion. His descendants rule Austria-Hungary until 1918, building on the security established in 1683. Leopold himself receives less historical credit than deserved. He made crucial decisions to defend Vienna and organized the relief force despite enormous political obstacles. His flight from the city damages his reputation, but his strategic judgment proves sound. The siege's anniversary is commemorated annually in Vienna for over 3 centuries. September 12th becomes unofficial holiday celebrating the city's deliverance. Veterans associations organize parades. Churches hold special services. The celebrations continue until World War I disrupts Austrian traditions. Even today, Vienna maintains awareness of 1683 as defining moment in the city's history. The siege shaped Vienna's identity permanently. The Battle of Vienna demonstrates how single events can alter historical trajectories. If Kara Mustafa had assaulted immediately rather than laying siege, Vienna might have fallen. If Sobieski had arrived one day later, the city would have collapsed. If the cavalry charge had failed, the Ottoman Empire might have conquered Central Europe. History turned on margins too narrow to measure. The siege reminds us that great outcomes often depend on small moments and individual decisions made under impossible pressure.